Hello, everyone, and welcome to Awards Buzz. I'm Abe Friedtanzer.
I'm Stacey Yvonne.
I'm Scott Menzel.
And I'm Shadan Larki.
We are here with the arduous task of predicting the Oscar nominations. We're recording just hours after the announcement of the Screen Actors Guild Award nominations, which threw some chaos into everything. And we are talking without the benefit of the BAFTA nominations, the American Society of Cinematographers nominations, and the Art Directors Guild. That's in increasing or decreasing order of importance, but there's still a lot to know and a lot of different leading ideas from the Golden Globe winners, the SAG nominees, to the newly postponed Critics' Choice ceremony. There's a lot going on. So we're going to start from the bottom up, from some of the less known categories to celebrate those. We're going to offer predictions as we can and do a little discussion on what may or may not be nominated. And we reserve the right to update our predictions until shortly before the announcement is made on Friday, January 17th. So keep an eye out for an article that will clarify it. We've had more chance to ponder our mistakes, which hopefully they'll be. So starting with the best live action short category, this has 15 films shortlisted. So we have a general place to start there in terms of what the options could be. I've had the chance to see all 15, which I've mentioned in the past. I think is a disservice. The more you see, the less you know about what people actually want to nominate. But I'm curious from those who have had a chance to at least look into this race, what are our five frontrunners? Scott, do you want to start us off?
For a live action short, correct?
Yep.
I have I'm Not a Robot, Angela, is that how you say that?
I think it's Anuja, but I'm not sure. I don't. Yeah.
The Masterpiece, The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent, and Dovecote are the ones that I would pick in that category.
Dovecote, by the way, has Zoe Saldana in it, so that's an important one that some visibility.
She's gonna be there, so yes, exactly.
No,
All right,
that's a
Shadan, what do
good
you think?
guess, Scott. I have three of yours, but I have an orange from Jaffa and Crust as my other two. So I have I'm Not a Robot, A Man Who Could Not Remain Silent, a Nuju, Crust, and an orange from Jaffa. But I may put that Zoe Saldana short in there because they love shorts that are backed by stars. Those tend to do really well.
Yes.
Except if they're directed by Pedro Almodovar, who has had two compelling submissions in recent years that have not been nominated. So that's my counterpoint to that. I also think that it's one there's really no dialogue, and so it's hard to connect to it in the same way. But I do have Anuja. I have Crust. I think it's definitely a good choice. I'm Not a Robot, which I really enjoyed, and Orange from Jaffa, and Aline, which is a very powerful and disturbing film that I think will relate a lot as one of the few American English language entries in this category. Moving ahead to best animated short, this one is a little bit more upbeat. Traditionally, all the live action ones are, some of them are very, very depressing, and it's hard to feel happy after suffering through them. They're very well done, certainly, but the animated does have some more optimistic options in there. Shadan, do you want to start us off here?
Yeah, the five that I have, without any confidence, are Origami, A Bear Named Wojtek, A Crab in the Proof, Yuck, and Beautiful Men.
Scott, what do you think?
I got Beautiful Men, Wander to Wonder, Yuck, The Bear Name. Is it Wovacek? Is that what it is?
I
And
think
then Me.
it's Polish. Yeah.
And Me.
I do have Yuck and Beautiful Man, which I know we mentioned. I think the Wild Tempered, I think it's Clavier. Clavier is very, very good. Magic Candies, and the film that is under 3 minutes, Origami, which I think makes a very strong impression. So I will be curious to see what others feel about this category. Um, Moving ahead, we have the documentary short, which that's one that again has a lot of American entries in there, a lot of very powerful ones. Um, Scott, you have some thoughts here?
So Death by Numbers, Chasing Rue, Michaela's Voice, Once Upon a Time in Ukraine, and I Am Ready, Warren. Warden, sorry, Warden. So this is an interesting one because I feel like there's a lot of hot button topics being discussed in the documentary shorts. So this out of the three of the short categories, I think this is the one that could kind of be more interchangeable. I see a lot of like predictions switching for this in the next couple of days as we go into the predictions, but then also changing a lot once they're actually revealed as well.
Don, what do you have?
I have Eternal Father, Once Upon a Time in Ukraine, Michaela's Voice, A Swim Lesson, and Planet Walker.
Mhm.
Those are some good choices. I do think Michaela's Voice seems to be a common thread. I think that one's probably in. That's also on Netflix. A Swim Lesson comes from Rashida Jones and Will McCormack. Will won for If Anything Happens, I Love You, the animated short a few years ago. So that's definitely worth considering. And Once Upon a Time in Ukraine, one of the directors is Betsy West, who did RBG. So while those are not like high profile, I think it's worth having those in there. Planet Walker also is very compelling, and Incident, another sort of hot button one, which is basically mostly footage, like police cam footage of a shooting, an officer involved shooting. So I never do too well in the documentary short category, especially compared to the others, but I will be curious to see. And I think a lot of the awards interested public becomes a lot more invested once the nominations are out. So I look forward to revisiting once we've had a chance to see those. And I know that Stacey, you said you didn't have a chance to take a look at these. So I'd love for you to start us off with our first feature category, Best Animated Feature, which has no short.
Best animated feature, I have Wild Robot. I threw in, of course, Flow, which is always kind of, the one. I threw in Transformers 1. It hasn't gotten a lot, but I don't know, I just feel like it has enough of a cachet and it's kind of a sleeper. So I don't know. I feel like someone might throw that in. And then Wallace and Gromit. They had nominations, unfortunately no wins, but it is kind of a very Academy, the Academy kind of likes projects like that. And I couldn't come up with the fifth one. I was like, what else is out there? My mind has been completely blank. So that's why I got.
It's Inside Out too, just because
Oh,
like
that's
there
right.
always has to be a Disney title. Like and no matter how good or
Yeah.
bad they are, there always has to be a Disney title.
Yeah. Unfortunately, well, not, I mean, just interestingly enough, the fact that that came out so early and there have been so many other kind of releases, it kind of seems like it has lost some of the sauce. Like they had some FYC events and there was a little bit of talk about it, but it just seems like it's a non-starter. So I can definitely see it making the noms list, of course, but I don't know how much further past that it will go.
Don, what do you think?
I have The Wild Robot, Flow, Inside Out 2, Memoir of a Snail, and Wallace and Gromit.
Yeah,
And I feel
and
pretty good about that 5.
yeah, and I have the same. I mean, I like what Stacy's saying about Transformers 1 sneaking in there and kicking something out. And it's weird because I think if it kicks something out, it's going to be one of the stop motion movies, which is a shame because I mean, that's my favorite type of animation, but Wallace and Gromit is such a like beloved franchise that everyone knows of. So I don't feel like that's the case. So the chopping block one would be Memoir of a Snail.
Mhm.
But I do feel like, again, knowing who votes on these things, like there's going to be a lot of people who are going to have a lot of love for that because of the attention to detail and the budget and everything on it. I just can't. I think this 5 is honestly the 5 that's going to be there.
Mhm.
That's what I have too. It's the Golden Globe list minus Moana 2, which that feels a lot more like a Golden Globe inclusion than the Oscar one. I feel like back in the day, like the Golden Globes did not have quite as elite taste with animated stuff and were not as international. But then one year they nominated the Boss Baby, and the Baby got nominated for an Oscar. So like, who knows? And
So
so I feel like
wild.
this category, out of everything, I'm actually feel probably the most secure in this category. That said, animated, I actually had to hunt down a lot of these. Like I hadn't seen them earlier on and had missed a few things, and so I feel more prepared for animated than in the past, which is a great opportunity for me to be completely surprised. And nothing's gonna happen there. Moving on
I
to a
just
category. Yeah, please, Scott.
can I just say I have one final closing remark? You know, the flow conversation that we had when we were on the Golden Globe thing, and I changed my prediction to Wild Robot last minute. I feel very confident about Wild Robot here, like just winning this category because it has that old school Disney magic for it. I know it's not a Disney movie, but it feels like an old school Disney movie. And I think when you look at the Academy and how they vote, I feel like that's something that I feel very strong on. I know a lot of people are like, maybe Flo's going to come in and take it. I don't. I don't see that. Just wanted to add that little 2 bits to that.
I mean, we'll come back to your owner predictions, but after last year with the Boy and the Heron versus Across the Spider-Verse, I'm ready to say that Flow might be in, but we can't spend that much time on here because we only have several hours. So we'll be back and have plenty of
I
time
was like, I
to
have more to say, but no.
please, Stacey, go ahead. Say something.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that that was kind of a different because you were dealing with Miyazaki versus, something that's a little bit different. So in this case, I actually do feel like Wild Robot would edge it out because it's not necessarily that it gives old school Disney, but because it uses these techniques that are new to create this more nostalgic kind of look, it gives that feeling of being comfortable while also being something we haven't seen before. And so I think that that goes a long way. Plus, Chris Bauer's on track. I mean, what are you going to do? So it's good times.
That's true. We'll see what happens with all this. Shadan, thanks for being here. Hope you're doing okay off camera there, or off mute.
Oh.
You want to make sure
As
you're
she's
okay.
coughing just as you do that.
Okay, we are going to move on to best documentary feature. I would say the confidence I have for animated is the exact opposite about how I feel for the documentaries. And I actually just saw my 15th shortlisted film. So I have seen all the films in this category, and I feel like I know even less. I believe there were 13 of them that could easily be nominated. So I'm going to let somebody who has not seen everything take the lead. Stacey, do you want to take a gander here?
Yeah, this one I did Daughters because I love that one and I want it to do well. um, I threw in soundtrack to a coup. It really hasn't done anything, but god dang it, I love that doc. And I don't know. I'm hoping for a sleeper, so we'll see what happens. Will and Harper, Dahomey. Did we ever figure out how that was pronounced? Is it Dahomey? Dahomey?
I like the way you said it. The whole,
I
you
like
know.
Dahomey. And then Frida. Um, yeah, I mean, Frida's an easy one. It's a great documentary. It was well produced. It's palatable, very goes down easy. So, but feels very like, ooh, she.
Shadan, are you?
Um,
Oh, we'll come back to you in a second. If you're good, Shadan.
so for me, like, I have to say, like, what's strange about it is that the movie that I'm least sure about in this, and I don't have it on my prediction list, is Will and Harper. I don't. This is another movie that I feel like just sort of has like burned out, like it's lost a lot of steam, and I also just kind of always go back to like the subject matters, like they really like the Academy for some reason doesn't like, these iconic people being celebrated. I don't know what it is about it. Like they always do well in Emmys, but they never do well on the Academy. So I mean, like we talked about, like Christopher Reeve being snubbed completely didn't surprise me in the slightest. So that's why I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm going to just say that I think Black Box Diaries is going to be like a movie. A lot of people are talking about this. It hasn't like showed up. It's been kind of like wonky where it's showing up, but I do feel that. And then a couple other additions that Stacey didn't mention before: No Other Land and Sugarcane are the ones that I would add into the conversation.
Shadan, what do you
Yeah,
think?
guys, forgive me. I have a cold, and then Stacy made me laugh, and it sort of just set off like this chain reaction of everything happening. So I'm sorry about that. But documentary, I was telling Abe, is I think one of the most interesting categories of the year. And every time I play with my predictions, documentary is the first one that I'm kind of tinkering with. And I think beyond maybe three of these, I don't have much confidence. So the five that I have is Daughters, which I'm predicting to win. I think that is a strong contender. I have Sugarcane, No Other Land, Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, and The Remarkable Life of Ibelin, just because it's on
That sounds good.
Netflix and accessible to people. But I mean, I think like Will and Harper is probably my alternate. There's also the BB Files, which I could see doing well. Porcelain War, which I've heard a lot about. Dahomey and Black Box Diary. So I gave you 10 options there, but I could easily see like any combination of those 10. And on any given day, I'm sort of playing with what the final 5 are going to be. I think this is going to be a really interesting one to watch.
Having seen the BB Files, I think that is one of the ones I cannot imagine being nominated.
Mm.
But I suppose it's always possible. I do think that No Other Land will be nominated. I think Sugarcane also. Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat is just so inventive. Reminds me a lot of Summer of Soul in terms of the way that it's constructed.
Right.
Like it really feels like it's not just a documentary, it feels like a cinematic experience. That said, what I saw very recently in a theater, because they didn't have links available, was Eno, which is a film that has a generative algorithm that makes every time you watch it different.
Wow.
Now, that's really interesting, but it means I didn't see the same thing that someone else saw. And so I find it hard to imagine that, given that it's going, I'm still baffled by the idea. It was very, very interesting, very well done, but I could have seen something totally different than someone else. So I feel like it's hard to know how unifying that'll be or how just how intriguing otherwise. I am backing Black Box Diaries. I think that one is going to make it. And I also think Will and Harper will probably be in, but it feels strange to leave off Daughters and Daomi. And the remarkable life of of Eibelin, I think also could easily be there. And Union, which is about Amazon, and Hollywood Gate, which is about Taliban Afghanistan, and Frida, which you mentioned, Stacey, and Porcelain War about Ukraine. Like there's just so much. I would be surprised by Queendom, because I think that is a very interesting film, but that is the other one that I do not I would be very shocked by. But I just feel like we all made great cases for what it could be, and I just have no idea. And I feel like we already got our big snub with Superman not making the cut. So I feel like that could be Daughters here. But that said, everybody loves Daughters. I don't know.
You know what's interesting is that because, of course, different guilds and different organizations are going to have different nominations, and it's just based on kind of who their people are. Because when you look at, I believe it was the NAACP nominations that came out, Barbie was on there, which was a fantastic documentary, Black Barbie, and then Never Too Much, the Luther Vandross documentary, and so in certain circles, that's all that's being talked about. But then you go to like an academy circle and that's a completely different conversation. So we have all of these like fantastic kind of documentaries out there, but it just depends on who it appeals to at the right time, who's going to be on there. But there's so many good choices.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with so many of these, so many groups and organizations at this point. Like, I saw that there was an article that came out right after the Globes. Like, it's like why the Globes don't matter, like why what happened today doesn't matter. And I think you can say that about every group, right? I mean, you can you can argue that a lot of these groups are going to have different picks. What I love the most, the groups that I love the most, in all fairness, are the ones that are specific to the topic that they're doing nominations for, right? So like
Right.
actors doing nominations for other actors, that to me is interesting, right? No, fully knowing that some of that is just based on the fact that it's high school and it's like, oh, I really like this person, so I'm going to vote for this person. But I do think when you go into the below the line categories and you get like a hair and makeup or you get like an editing, like those are people who are really looking at those details and going like, yes, these are the 5 movies that I really feel are the best edited movies. And that's why I think those guilds are actually a little bit more important to pay attention to than, I mean, I'm not trying to shit on critics, don't get me wrong, but I do think there's so many critic organizations and there's so much out there that it's very like, it's kind of by the numbers. It's like, here's the 10 movies that we know that we're supposed to be voting for. And there's very rare that you kind of see a surprise there. But with these, it's sort of like someone who's looking at the craft and kind of acknowledging that. And I think that's kind of important. And I really why these categories, and thank you, Abe, for putting this kind of in our little like cheat sheet that we're looking at to kind of give us that information of like, oh, this is what the hair and makeup guild thinks or what this guild thinks. And I think that's very helpful.
And statistically, like when you're making your nominations, the guilds are the most predictive. So that those are the lists you should be ultimately looking at when you're making your predictions.
Yeah.
And I did ask the directors of Black Box Diaries, Annabelle and Harper, what documentaries they liked this year. And I wish I remembered offhand what they said. But you'll have to watch those interviews and take a look to see. But I always interesting to see what they're having a chance to see. Speaking of specialty stuff, we have the best international feature category. This is another one where I have seen all 15 of the films on the list. And it's not that I don't know what to do, I just feel like we need more nominees. I think that there are 3 locks. I'll be curious if we don't agree that there are 3 locks. That said, I will remind everyone that Decision to Leave was snubbed a couple years ago after being like a front runner for the whole time. Fallen Leaves was left off. It is very possible that something that people think is going to be really big doesn't make it. So I will speak last on this, but I encourage Scott. Looks like you have something you want to start us off with.
I think we're all pretty safe right now. We feel, especially after the Globes of it all. I mean, Amelia Perez is picked up some steam, and I think we would probably all agree that that's the front runner in this category. And then I would say followed very closely by I'm Still Here, which has been a pretty much a universal favorite for a lot of voters, and has popped up in a lot. Followed by The Seat of the Sacred Fig. And then, as Abe's going on, I think it's the sort of up in the air for the other two. So I'm going to go with Amand, and I'm going to go with Flo. And I'm fully aware that Flo may not get in because it may be in the animated category, or it may miss the animated category and may end up here. And something, and Transformers 1 will get into the animated category to tie it all back together.
So I love international feature film. It's a category that I watch pretty closely. I think we can all agree Amelia Perez and Grave the Oscar. I agree with you, Scott. I'm Still Here and The Seat of the Sacred Fig are locks. And then I'm gonna go with Kneecap. It did very well with the BAFTA long lists. I feel like having that support is significant here. Now, for a long time, I had The Girl with the Needle from Denmark as my number 5. But given Flo doing, winning the animation globe, I'm really wrestling with, do I give Flo my 5th slot? So I think that's what I'm going with now, but I think there's passion for The Girl with the Needle as well. And then to go back to Doc for a second, I for a long time had Dahomey getting in both Doc and International, and I have a hard time saying no, it's not going to get into either one. So that's also, I think, a dark horse for that 5th slot as well. But I do feel confident in Kneecap. And I think The Quiet Girl from Ireland was nominated 2 or 3 years ago last year. So I think, I feel good about Kneecap.
See?
Would you have it? Oh, I'm sorry. I was waiting for you. All mine were mirroring Scott, like literally pound for pound. I had each one. I'm Still Here, Amelia Perez, Armand, Flo, and Seat of the Sacred Figs. I would love to see Girl with the Needle. I think that would be really cool. I don't know that it has made as much of an impression. However, I don't know that Armand did either. I just really love it. So, but I know the people who do like that movie, the people who have seen that movie like it. It's just a matter of getting a good group of people who have actually seen it.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to add that I believe Armand was nominated for Best First Time Director at the Directors Guild America today. So that is definitely a big boost for it. And it of course has Renata Rendve as the star, and that's definitely exciting, and something that people can some people can relate to. I have a much longer article that everybody can read, looking at the history of all the films, the countries in this category. The most damning statistic I look back at is my first year following this category closely when I was living in New York City, and I think then there were 9 films on the shortlist, and I saw 8 of them. And that was the year that Voltaire got nominated for Best Actress and got snubbed in this category. And so that, if we were to mirror that, which we're not going to, that's I'm Still Here getting snubbed, which is, I don't think, going to happen because that film is just coming out. It's on the way up. and there's such a big narrative around it. That said, The Seat of the Sacred Thing, people have been talking about as a potential surprise snub because it has not been performing as expected. All We Imagine Is Light, which we mentioned previously, is not eligible here because it was not India's submission, and India was not even shortlisted here. That got the Golden Globe nomination for Best Director that people thought Seat of the Sacred Thing would. I would be genuinely surprised to see that show up anywhere besides maybe screenplay. But that film was sort of revered for a while. That said, I remember other years this where Estonia had this incredible film that's like their national story and didn't get nominated. And so sometimes people just want a documentary like Collective or Honeyland or something, and it's not always going to be that. And so that's why I'm curious whether Dahomey will get nominated, even though Mati Diop, the director, had a film Atlantics that was shortlisted a few years ago that did not get nominated. So that tells me maybe not. I'm also not sure about Flow. I'm still going to keep the safe three, though I would be excited to see Emilia Perez not nominated here just for complete chaos and to then get recognized elsewhere. I think there's a lot of cases to be made for certain films. I think Universal Language is great. I think Waves is great. I think Touch is great, but I don't know that people are really Santosh. Like there's a lot of great films. I think How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies, being Thailand's like most popular film ever, really big deal. It reminds me a lot, even though it's a bigger scale, sort of Lunana, A Yak in the Classroom, which got nominated for Bhutan a few years ago. This is Thailand's first shot, would be Thailand's first nomination. I think it's going to happen. Vermilio from Italy seemed like a front runner for a while.
Yeah.
But I'm actually going to put in From Ground Zero, which is Palestine's Oscar submission. It's a collection of short films. And even though I don't know that I would judge it on the same level as everything else, I think it's obviously in shortlisting No Other Land for Best Documentary. This is obviously a topic people are invested in right now. And I think it is, once you get on the short list, people see your movie. And so I feel like the fact that they got there, people might be tempted to include it, but I would not be surprised if my two, third, fourth, and fifth choices were completely wrong. Shadan, do you have something to add?
I was just gonna say, I think How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies is a great call because a lot of times too we see films, and this is true for the shorts as well. Sometimes just an interesting title is enough to get people to go, "What is that? Let me watch it," and that's enough to get in. And I think just making the short list and having that passion to make the short list is very telling as well for that film.
Well, it's going to be also very interesting to see what Emilia Perez does, if anything, in this category. Because, of course, I'm sure it's going to go up for Best Picture, but then it's like, okay, are they not going to do Best Picture or Best International Feature? Which means, okay, then we got to give it some acting things or some craft things. And so it's just going to be interesting to see how it's moved around, what people's thought processes are when they actually start creating the ballots and then voting.
I think the bigger the voting body, the more difficult it is to predict this. And, similar to my theory on the Globes, where they had a whole change of like the membership every year when they open up the membership or they let new members into, I should say, for the Academy, it is a lot of people are coming in. And those votes are definitely there's definitely more people of color. There's definitely more optics in terms of the way that people are voting in there, that it's not nearly as predictable, which is why you're seeing, so many movies kind of slide into these categories that you never really expected a couple of years ago that have now broken in. So I can see um, a lot of these movies like the Grandma Dies movie, like I can see that getting in now because of that. Title, because it's interesting title, and two, just simply because it's the voting window, the voting body has changed. And I think that's the most important thing that we need to like constantly look at is as we evolve with the times, as Hollywood evolves, the people who make up these organizations are constantly shifting, and the percentage of voters of women of color or men of color or the LGBTQ community or international voters is constantly going up, and that's going to change things. So what used to be like 5 years ago a lock, oh, like that's definitely going to get in, may not be the lock this year.
And I also think it's worth noting for How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies, despite its title, it's quite an affirming and uplifting film. And our three frontrunners are not. They are very good, but they are definitely not like happy films. And so there's
Right.
something. I remember even that for the best documentary short race, maybe like a decade ago, when there were all these films about death and misery and all this stuff, and there was one about like a multicultural school doing well, and that one because sometimes people just need like a bit of positivity in the world.
Mhm.
Um, but let's, as we move away from these specialty categories, let's head to our below the line races and to a film that favors monkeys. A category that favors monkeys and other different visual effects. We have a surprise. Someone else definitely wrote this about how we with Better Man, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Mufasa, the Lion King. Like we have a surprising number of monkeys in this race, which sorry, Wicked, of course. What am I talking about? Wicked as the flying monkey. So there's a lot of monkeys here. Will it be all monkeys or something else? Shadan, do you want to give us your guesses here for visual effects?
Yes, and I'd just like to add for those of you that are maybe not, if you're like listening and not watching, I'm just ferociously nodding my head the whole time when Scott talks.
There's a
Okay,
reason
so
this
best,
isn't a podcast.
yeah, best visual effects. I have Dune Part 2. I have Gladiator 2, Wicked, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and I'm going for my fifth slot with Deadpool and Wolverine.
I'll jump in. I mean, I think Alien Romulus is going to get in this category just because of the practical effects on here with the visual, with the visual stuff. I think we always shortchange that how much people appreciate that in the industry. Um, and I have Wicked, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Doom Part 2. My last pick is Gladiator 2, which at this point, if that gets left off, I wouldn't be surprised at all. And that
Yeah.
could be replaced with like something like Twisters.
Well, so I was thinking about Alien Romulus, and I can see that getting more love and sound. Oddly enough, I think that visual effects is a little more congested this year, and it leaves a little too much room for a movie like Alien Romulus to get pushed off. But it is pretty undefeated in terms of sound. It has a fantastic soundscape, and not score and that kind of stuff, but specifically like the way that they've kind of crafted sound and use that for fear, etc. Um, I had Doom Part 2. I threw Mufasa in there. It oddly enough, it did really well on the box office, and it's starting to kind of like make a little mark. I don't know. People are really starting to talk about it. So it'll be interesting to see if those conversations kind of get to the voters, but it's creating a little bit of buzz. And then Gladiator 2. And I threw in Twisters and Wicked.
Yeah.
I do think The Lion King is a good point. I have Mufasa in there as well. The first film was nominated, lost to 1917, and I'd like to think it also lost to Avengers Endgame, even though obviously that didn't win because only one film wins. But I think like it was still in competition there. Um, I always look at the franchises and how they've done in the past. I think Dune Part Two is the lockiest of all locks. And that said, and especially given that that is no longer looking like a major player in a lot of the top categories, it's fine here. It's still probably going to win. That's great. Good for it, you know? The Planet of the Apes, the new movies, the entire series has been nominated, so there's no reason to expect that the Kingdom wouldn't.
Mhm.
Wicked, I am less certain of because I think Wicked, despite what people were saying what the Golden Globes indicated, I think after SAG today, Wicked is back in a big way. It never really went anywhere. It was just waiting to get to that point, which I was wrong about. I thought it would do poorly at SAG. But I do think that it's possible. I remember Black Panther wasn't nominated for Best Visual Effects. So just because that's a part of a wildly successful movie doesn't mean it will be here. Gladiator 2, I feel pretty good about predicting. Um, and that's five for me. That said, Alien Romulus did do really, really well on the short lists. Better Man is an act of constant visual effects. Scott does not approve. And I think we'll come back to that in a sec, Scott. Deadpool and Wolverine, the first Deadpool film was shortlisted, didn't get nominated. I think the visuals are incredible in that film, and I would certainly enjoy. But Marvel is not as consistent as it should be, and doesn't do as well as it could. I'd be intrigued by Civil War though, because I feel like that show, like that's in. We'll get to it later for editing. That was an Ace Eddie nominee. Like I'm curious whether people really that film made an impression because I remember seeing it and being like, "Whoa, this is going to be big," and then nothing.
I'm
So
curious.
I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm curious about Civil War as well because that was another film that overperformed with BAFTA. So like there is clearly some passion for that film, but it also got snubbed in sound, which I thought was interesting. But I just would like to say on record that you guys have now convinced me to put because I had Alien Romulus in my fifth slot, and then speaking of sound, Deadpool and Wolverine did really well with the Sound Guild, so I was like maybe that'll translate to visual effects as well. But I'm gonna go Alien Romulus. Should have stuck with my gut to begin with. So.
I mean,
Scott, can
I
we get
just
a
want to go to
90
like
second?
what's
Yeah,
Stacey's
please
point
go ahead.
real quick because she talked about this last time, like with the Better Man and the Kingdom of the Planet Apes. Listen, I think Michael Gacy, who directed Better Man, is. I know people were very mixed on Greatest Showman, but I mean, from as a musical lover, I mean, I know that people hate the story, but it takes a man's story and they kind of makes it into a glorification of like, oh, he's such a great person. But from a musical element and from a visual standpoint, like that man knows how to direct a fucking movie. Like, pardon my French. Like he is just a visual director, and I hope he gets Tangled because he's gonna do such great things with it if that actually does happen. But like when you're comparing like Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes and Better Man, which is done by the same company, like it's like you have to pick. Like you're not gonna have two of the same movies in there where it's one person who's a monkey or a whole world of monkeys. Like I just don't see it getting in for that reason. If Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes wasn't out this year, I would say okay, Better Man would get in, but I just don't see it.
My only counterpoint, and I said this on a previous Zoom, is in 2002, I remember someone saying that Frida's unibrow beat an entire whatever the from the time machine, I don't know what they are, like an entire millions of whatever that they created the creatures. So I do think sometimes specific character stuff that was makeup, obviously not visual effects, but I do think that we have to look to history, the history
Yes.
of the Oscars.
And can
Shadan.
I just say to Stacey's point about sort of Mufasa sort of kind of peaking a little bit at the right time, I would say the same thing is true of Better Man because people have really started to talk about it. And we
Mm,
should note that what Oscar voting started today, so it could be
yes.
peaking at exactly the right time.
Mm.
And a factor we shouldn't have to consider, of course, is that, we're talking about this as the fires are still raging in LA and a lot of events are being canceled. And so, how much does the fact that the Better Man premiere was canceled, the Last Showgirl premiere was canceled, how much does that? It shouldn't play into it. And there should be a way for people to see it. But for instance, I went to go see Eno, which is a film that can only be seen in person. If it was canceled, I wouldn't have seen it. Does that mean voters wouldn't have seen it? Like, obviously, they should have access via a platform, but is there still something about going? Are there people who really like to go and see? And how much does, even though it shouldn't, how much does the experience of when and where you see something really affect the voting?
I agree. I've said that. I will preach that forever. That going to an event, seeing a movie in a theater versus watching something on an app. There's a disadvantage of watching something on an app as much as like I want to do it more. um, Sitting in a theater and being locked and kind of forced to watch something is much different than sitting at home and going like, oh man, this is like 30 minutes in. Let's order a pizza. The pizza came and like, this is really not attracting me right now. Let's put this on pause and put on, Jeopardy or something. Like it's just like you're gonna switch over and you're not focused on it. And I do think that a lot of this has to do, I mean, awards voters are all about the experience, about what food they're being. I mean, I can tell you as someone who's been to numerous Emmy events, these people don't show up to events. They don't know what the hell they're watching. They're just there for the spread, and they hear like, "Oh, Jennifer Aniston's going to be here today, so maybe the morning show's good." Like that's literally like I had that happen like when I was in line for the morning show, like FYC thing. Like someone said that in line. So I do think that these experiences do matter to people and they do help. And I think like I always use Coda as an example, was like when you went to a Coda FYC screening, there was always a point in the movie where everyone in the freaking room would start crying and tearing up. And then being able to kind of go to those people immediately afterwards and have a conversation with them those are experiences that people like cherish. Like it really, really is. And I use the Robert Downey Jr. example last time were on the stream, but those things are really life changing to a lot of these voters. And I think anyone who discounts that doesn't know what they're talking about.
Well, let's turn over to an element that is best experienced in a theater with very good sound. Stacey, do you want to take us through best sound?
Yes, I put Alien Romulus, of course. I did choose Dune 2. I threw Blitz in there because they are trying hard to get it on somewhere. So I think, if anything, this might be it for sound. Same with Joker. Lynn, if I was like, if it's going to do anything anywhere, this would be the category and nothing else. And that's fine. And then, of course, Wild Robot, I think for sound is a good choice.
Can I say that I had Blitz in my sound predictions for so long, and it's my number 6 right now. Like, I want to predict it so badly because I feel like I'm one of the only people that liked that film, and the sound is
Well, that
so
saw it.
well done. The
Mhm.
sound is incredible. I just feel like that movie is dead, unfortunately, because like I said, I really did like it. I'm going big on big movies, which is probably a mistake. So I have Wicked, Dune Part 2, Amelia Perez, because musicals tend to do well here. A Complete Unknown, which did do well with the Sound Editors Guild that released their nominations.
Mm.
Same thing for Deadpool and Wolverine. Of all the shortlisted films, Deadpool and Wolverine got the most mentions in the various sound categories for the guild, so I feel good about predicting that here. So those are my 5.
I
Yeah, I mean, I
have
have Deadpool and
sorry,
Wolverine. I have Alien Romulus. I have Complete Unknown based on Abe's description last time around. Wicked and Dune Part 2.
I have a question. I want to know you guys' thoughts on this because it's kind of the same issue that I'm having with uh with Wicked. That's what I was going to say, with Wicked kind of being a part of this. So a movie like Deadpool and Wolverine, audiences loved it, but it's very much a popcorn movie. I don't, I, I'm not thinking that there are huge dramatic leaps. There's no kind of overly emotional scenes outside of just being very geeked as like a fan guy, fangirl for the property. But I'm wondering, how seriously does the Academy take movies like that? I know Black Panther did well, but that's kind of its own thing. And so would Deadpool and Wolverine even rate on a scale for even these craft nominations?
Well, to Abe's point, like with a lot of these crafts categories, the individual branches are the ones that are voting. So if you're a sound nerd and you're watching Deadpool and Wolverine and you're like, wow, the sound's really good, then you're going to vote for it, even if the
Mhm.
quality of the film is not there necessarily.
I also think, I mean, looking at the past winners, it's a real mixed bag. The Zone of Interest won last year, and that is a film that is hyper specific. And I feel
Yeah.
like the closest thing, if you're looking at the shortlist this year, in a lot of ways, is Blitz, because Blitz, it's the feeling of dread when you see, that there's something about to be dropped and there's something that's about to happen. It's sort of not a lack of sound, but it's a very careful application of sound. When I think about Gladiator 2, I hear, the swords clashing together. When I think about Wicked, I think about how loud it is and it's just enveloping me with everybody singing. Something like Alien Romulus, again, is the more subtle kind of thing. Whereas Deadpool and Wolverine, I think about that opening scene with everybody, all those time variance authority agents just being brutally killed, and like I hear it, I can still remember what it
Mm.
sounds like. And so you have winners like Top Gun Maverick, Sound of Metal, which again is more towards the subtle, Ford versus Ferrari, 1917. And so that's why I have Gladiator 2, which I don't think anybody said for this one on my list, because I think that could do well. I also think just musicals in general or films that you use music. I think A Complete Unknown again is a mixture. It's like the live music is a really big part of what makes that film work. Even if you say you don't like the screenplay, you don't love the biopic structure, the sound really works very well. And so to me, that feels like a good complement to Emilia Perez and Wicked, which are so musical heavy. And especially given how well Emilia Perez is doing, because we can make the argument that like some people don't like it. Those people are not awards voters. It has been doing consistently well. Like it is the public, it is people online, it is a lot of other people.
Yeah.
But awards voters, like we are past it. Like it is gonna do very well. Whether it wins is a question, but like we're past that at this point. So that's why I have Dune Part 2, Wicked, A Complete Unknown, Emilia Perez, and Gladiator 2, with plenty of trepidation about excluding The Wild Robot, Alien Romulus, and Blitz based on what you've all said.
Yeah.
So good thing we have 10 shortlisted options, and we feel like, 8 or 9 are a pretty solid shot. But if we're feeling like 10 wide short lists are too restricting, let's move over to something that is a little bigger. I would say 15, but our friends from Better Man, I mentioned during our last stream, have been disqualified because apparently Forbidden Road included something that had been used before. Why people don't realize this until after something has been shortlisted, and then means that there are literally only 14 films shortlisted. I don't know why that happens. But here in Best Original Song, I've spent some time yesterday listening to all these. I remember going into certain films like Mufasa and Moana and being like, is that it? Is that the one? Is that the song? Just try to see if I could hear it as part of the film. And so I am curious from all of you whether we think the songs that are actually performed in the film, if that makes a difference, or whether it's just the end credits traditional thing. Shadan, do you want to start us off here?
Well, statistically, the songs that are in the end credits do not do as well. Like, the voters like it when the song is integrated into the film, and I think that that's important to remember. With that said, so I have El Mal from Emilia Perez, our Golden Globe winner, Mi Camino from Emilia Perez. I feel confident that Emilia Perez is strong enough to get into Best Song nominees. We've seen that plenty when a musical film is quite popular. Then I have Kiss the Sky from The Wild Robot. I have Never Too Late. They obviously love Elton John. He's 2 for 2. You add in Brandy Carlisle. He certainly has a narrative going on right now. He, to Scott's point, made an appearance at the Globes. And then my fifth slot, this is probably controversial. I have Sick in the Head from Kneecap. I just think, again, that movie is available on Netflix. Plenty of people have seen it, liked it, again, did well with the BAFTA long list. So I do think there's a passion for that film that cannot be underestimated. Now, I do have Diane Warren in my sixth slot, and I know she is obviously the Susan Lucci of this category, so perhaps I'm foolish putting her at number 6, and she will surprise us. The song from Challengers, Compress Repress, Golden Globe nominee, could do very well here. And we mentioned, not knowing about Will and Harper in sort of the documentary. The song, which is co-written by Kristen Wiig, is something that Netflix has been pushing quite heavily. So that could also surprise here as well.
Stacey, go ahead.
So yeah, actually we are pretty tit for tat, Shadan. I have Compress Repress from Challengers. I put Never Too Late from Elton John. El Mal from I just did El Mal. I don't like the idea of there being 2. There's so many, but I get it. But yeah, I just put El Mal. And then I knew you were gonna do Sick in the Head though. That made me laugh. I was like, oh yeah, that's her all the way. I put The Journey from 6 AAA, or yeah, because Diane Warren again. What are we gonna do? And then Will and Harper, Go West. I would be very interested to see if Pharrell is going to try any more campaigning for that song, because when that movie came out, that's what everybody was talking about. And I even passed a documentary, but of course this is going to get best song, and then it just fizzled up. So I'm very interested to see if they're going to try any last minute come-ons.
I think that movie is dead. I mean,
Yeah.
it's sort of like the same way we're talking about Blitz. I mean, those movies just came and went. I mean, it was like 2 weeks period. People were talking about it, and then they just vanished. I mean, I'm gonna give you credit, Shadan. I did not have the Elton John song on my list, but I am actually 100% adding that to it probably in like the fifth slot. And I have to put the Diane Warren song in there, um, as well. And I think Kiss the Sky, and then the two songs from Amelia Perez. I think that Amelia Perez is gonna sort of play out very much like the Barbie soundtrack here, and kind of flip flop, and we're gonna see a couple like Mi Camino, one with Astras, El Mal, one with Globes. I'm curious which one of the two is gonna win at Critics' Choice. Is gonna be the one. Yeah, I don't know, but I can see those two just kind of flip flopping back and forth, back and forth. Um, but yeah, it's hard. But then again, I will say this. They did that Elton John FIC event here. And I heard that so many people got turned away
Yeah.
from it. And I do wonder if that's like the power of like the power of Elton John. I mean, he really is kind of a legend. That could this be the upset on Oscar night, that it's not those songs at all, and it's literally Alan John,
I
because it's a
could see
way
that.
better song than it was in the Rocket Man movie. Remember when he had the song in Rocket Man? It was not a good song, but this song is actually pretty good.
Yeah, and I didn't get to join you for the Globes predictions, but that's why I was predicting Kiss the Sky to win, because I thought that the Amelia Perez songs were going to split. So if they both end up becoming Oscar nominees, then they could very well still split the vote. And I do want to mention, even though I have 688 in my sixth slot, one thing that it does have going for it is that it's also shortlisted for score. So that shows that there's maybe a little bit more support for it besides just the Diane Warren of it all. So something to consider there as well.
I would say so. Piece by Piece, and Elton John Never Too Late are two of the only films that are shortlisted that I have not had a chance to see, and I will rush to see the moment nominations are announced if they either of them place here, because that's what I do. But I think the fact that they weren't on the documentary shortlist indicates that people aren't quite as enthusiastic about them. That's not necessarily the same thing. I just always sort of consider that a little bit. I'd also note that we didn't talk about the song from Moana 2. And while no one has had anything positive to say about Moana 2, generally speaking, I know that Frozen 2 had a song nominated, even though obviously Frozen 1 song is that much bigger than Moana 1 song. And even Moana, the first animated film, didn't win Best Animated Feature. So I don't think that's really in the race, just something to note. Yeah, go ahead, Stacey.
Oh, I was gonna say, it's so funny you said that about Moana, because that is definitely a thing of like the viewing audience. Everyone I know who has seen it loves it. However, there is the narrative of, well, Lin-Manuel isn't doing the music; he's doing the music for Mufasa. So that way, it's just a bust. And I'm like, it's kind of a disservice to Moana, but I get that. But it's so interesting that one person can kind of have that much of an effect on just their involvement, not even necessarily the song, but just their involvement. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say over and over again, I think even if Amelia Perez does not, possible Carlos Sofia won't be nominated, possible Jacques Audiard won't be nominated. Both songs are getting in here. I'm very certain of that. I think they'll hear it, and I think El Mal is winning. I have very little doubt of that. The stuff I've seen online, negative stuff, talks about the penis to vagina song that they really hate. So I feel like they like these two songs, and that's just the one they like to shit on a lot. Same with Wild Robot, even though I don't think it's going to ultimately win. I think that's in here.
Yeah.
The Diane Warren point of the 688, otherwise, besides the score shortlist not being nominated or supported elsewhere or a good film necessarily, Four Good Days was nominated. Like Diane Warren has, even though it's sort of like a strange thing, because people obviously like her, but don't like her. Like I don't really know what the story is there. I think that's probably in.
It's
I
because she
have
goes to the events, Abe. That's honestly what it is. I swear to God, it's like she shows up to every event. That's what it is. She
I
goes to any event, even when she's not invited. She's just like, I'm at an awards event here. I'm going to campaign, even though I'm here. Like, I've seen her
yeah.
so more than any other person in this industry.
I did see her at an event for Kiss the Sky and the Wild Robot score, which is funny. So she's obviously interested, but she also has a documentary about her coming out that was premiered at South by. So that could help. Not that she needs more help because she gets in general. I have the Challenger song as my last one. I'm a little iffy on that because I feel like that song is sort of so much like the score you can't even separate it, which is the problem I will bring up with Amelia Perez and Wicked when we get to score in a second. But we didn't mention the song from Sing Sing. And I think that if I'm a little I know Shadan is too. We're very worried about Sing Sing. Sing Sing is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. But if it does do well, this is an easy place for it to get in. But this is a pretty competitive category. We also have the song from Blitz, which is the one that Saoirse Ronan sings. I wasn't actually sure about that. That was, for people who don't love Blitz, still one of the stronger moments of the film. And I think
by Nicholas Britell, we should mention.
There you go. The Twister song, I feel like, is something that would have been nominated 2 decades ago, probably less so right now. But this is, again, it's an interestingly competitive category. Not so much as score, which, again, I said was mysteriously has 20 shortlisted films. I'm not sure why. I thought it was 15. I predicted 15, and there were 20. So I don't really know what's going on, and I feel like there's a handful of them, like The 688 or Horizon: An American Saga, or Young Woman in the Sea, where they're not getting nominated, but it's interesting that they're there. But I feel like we're a little overstuffed, especially when you consider, and that's my first question for all of you, Emilia Perez and Wicked. Great songs. Can you actually identify what the score is separately? And do you think Oscar voters can too?
No.
Yeah.
I mean,
no.
Because I think about that a lot with Wicked. And I think with both of those, honestly, with Emilia Perez and with Wicked, people think, oh, musical, so score. Like that it goes hand in hand. It's like, but it's not the same thing. And I think this is where, when we talk about what the guilds are voting for, what the actual musicians and the composers and that kind of thing, see who they're kind of putting in for their nominations, and that might be a better indicator, because those are not the same thing. And so I wouldn't necessarily think of Emilia Perez or a Wicked for score. However, something oddly like Conclave, I would throw in for score, because it is so very specific, and it changes the narrative of the film in such a specific way. So,
Stacey, what are your 5?
So my 5 are Challengers, Conclave. I put in Gladiator 2 mostly for the Ridley Scott of it all, but I think that it's just, I think it's just one of those that people are going to be like, yeah. And The Wild Robot. And then, where is it? Sorry. Ooh. It's kind of a toss-up between Wicked and Nosferatu, oddly enough, but the score for Nosferatu was wild.
Okay, I have Daniel Blumberg for The Brutalist. I still think he's winning, even though he didn't win the Globe. I actually have the duo from Emilia Perez. We can get to that a little bit later. I have Conclave and then Reznor and Ross for Challengers. I think they're huge names. I think the Golden Globes win right on the cusp of voting is going to really help them. And then I have Chris Bowers for The Wild Robot. What I'm curious, and I have the Wicked score in 6th place. What I'm really curious about is, like, let's say, there's a snub here. What else would replace it? Because we're looking at films that don't necessarily have a ton of support elsewhere. So we could see like a Soul, a Soul Blitz nomination for Hans Zimmer, for example, or like Nosferatu, but like, or even Danny Elfman getting in for Beetlejuice. But like, it seems like I think that our 5 nominations are going to come from films that are going to show up in other categories.
Yeah.
I think that's astute.
I think
it's
so too.
Also one of the things where, so Blink Twice was a movie that I loved, and I fought hard for that movie, and it didn't really pick up the traction that I wanted it to. And so then all of a sudden it's on the short list in best score. And it's just like, this movie was so much more than that. But to keep it in the conversation, it's like, okay, whatever, as long as it's on people's minds in some way. There is one main part of that where that's dependent on a song that isn't necessarily score, but it's more like soundtrack. And so, but I can't imagine the score from that movie. Like it hasn't stuck. And so I'm glad to see it on a short list. I just wish it were in a more relevant category. But when we do talk about kind of what would be left off, you have to think about movies like The Six Triple Eight, which does depend on environment and does depend on the score to really highlight, those scenes and give like emotion to those scenes. But then you have something like Inside Out 2. It's like, does that have the score as much as it has a song?
Yeah.
I would also note, as I always love to with my statistics, Inside Out 1 was not nominated. And Alberto Iglesias was nominated for Parallel Mothers. And so The Room Next Door, which you may remember mocking me then, and you should rightfully, The Room Next Door I had in all my categories because people thought Pedro, yeah. But now it's not happening at all. So it's always possible. That's what I think Pain and Glory was never a Best Picture contender. It was just a, Antonio vehicle. For me, this category, Brutalist and Conclave continue to be the front runners. I think Wild Robot as well, and you could make it boring, Emilia Perez and Wicked, and that's the category. I think Challengers would get in, but I always think back to First Man, which won the Golden Globe after La La Land. Justin Hurwitz really big, and then was snubbed, not even nominated for the Oscar. And then, of course, on his next shot, Babylon, he lost to Volker Bertelmann for All Quiet, who now is doing Conclave. So it's interesting to see who like the favorites are and how they fall off. So I would say Brutalist, Conclave, and Wild Robot are safe. Challengers probably, and I would put in Nosferatu, which I remember people saying would be like a Nightmare Alley type Best Picture thing. Now, all I'll say about that, which we'll get to later, is nobody thought Nightmare Alley was going to be nominated for Best Picture. So we'll see what that film is when we get to that category. But I think its score, when you talk about, evoking dread and the feeling, and even if that film didn't work for some people, I think the score really is very strong. And while I think Blink Twice is probably too genre to be in here, though I have not seen it, I will admit, I think that this is probably Nosferatu has a fighting chance. And to Gladiator 2, I will say I left that film upset and humming the score from Gladiator 1, which I wish had been part of it more. So I'm curious. I think initially we thought Gladiator 2 was going to be really, really big. I think Gladiator 2, its visuals have a stronger chance than its score here. Shadan, do you disagree? Would you like to fight?
I do not want to fight with you. I was actually going to say there's a couple of films that I think are question marks for me in terms of Oscar morning where I could see them potentially picking up several things or picking up nothing. I think Nosferatu is one of those. And so there's like several categories where I'm like, I could see them going for them or not. Challengers, similarly, Alien Romulus, we've kind of discussed maybe being on the cusp of a couple places. So it'll be interesting. Even Blitz could potentially, even The Room Next Door, you could potentially be in a 6-7 slot for a lot of these categories that we're going to get into. So we have kind of a couple narratives that are forming, I think.
Yeah.
And a great example of a film like that is Defiance, which got a single nomination for Best Original Score when it came out. That was a film that people thought could be really, really big, wasn't really showing up all the precursors, and then just Best Original Score, nothing else. And so it would be weird for that to be Nosferatu, given the technical, capabilities of that film and how much some people really, really, really love it. Scott, did you give us your thoughts here on this one?
No. I mean, I'm with. I think the Brutalist is the front runner here. I totally when they played that little clip at the Globes of like the reel of the song. I'm sorry, of the score. Like I was like, oh my God, like yeah, like I totally like how big of a character the score is in that movie. And I mean, in the same thing for Challengers. I mean, I think those are two things that I really like. Challengers, I remember the score more than anything about the movie.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I do think there's something about the Amelia Perez duo. Those two are very charming. They're very charismatic. They've been going, not discrediting the going around to every event and stuff like that. I think they're safe. Chris Bowers, I think, I think everyone connects the sound of Wild Robot to the movie. But for my fifth thing, I'm gonna put in the Conclave. I'm not sure like that. I'm really comfortable about like 3 of the 5 on this, like with a Wild Robot, Brutalist, and Amelia Perez. And I want to say Challengers, but I can see that one being dropped off. But Conclave is really the one where I'm like, maybe that will go to Nosferatu. Maybe that will go to something Wicked. Maybe that'll go to something else.
Well, Shadan had mentioned earlier about, or maybe it was Abe, sorry, someone very smart and knowledgeable mentioned about a movie that had just kind of come out and started to receive more press. Oh yeah, it was Shadan. We were talking about, was it Better
Better
Man?
Man. Yep.
Yeah. And so I feel like, so Conclave just recently had like a few different FYC events with it's like full cast. And a lot of what they talked about was sound, was the score, was the soundtrack, and, even the silences and that kind of thing. So I think that that's kind of a card, an ace in the pocket for them, where they're like, if we don't get anything on these acting ones, at least maybe we can get something for score and for all of that.
And I think they had Volker at the TIFF premiere also, just with everybody. And so
Yeah.
that said, my argument from before about the fact that Justin Hurwitz, and the thing with those films is that Volker could also be out now. Who knows? But I think Conclave is such an interesting specimen this season because it's doing well, but it's still sort of like it's like flat. Like it's not
A little
getting extra NACD
plateaued.
nominations. It's not all the other things, but like it's still in. Like it's not going to miss out, I don't think. But in my enthusiasm to connect oral experiences, I completely skipped over our
I was
planned
going to
discussion
ask.
of best
Yeah.
makeup and hairstyling. And as we go into this and wonder, will everybody be rushing to see how can we find Waltzing with Brando? We have had nominations in the past, like the 100-year-old man who climbed out the window and disappeared, which I thought was great, and a film I have never tracked down called Il Divo. So this category, the random film could still get in, but something tells me not having been released or seen by anybody doesn't do you that many favors. Is anyone predicting Waltzing with Brando in this category?
Can we hold on? Has anyone received an invite yet to see this movie? Like that's my question since we last talked about it. Has anyone got an invite?
Best Picture, Abe. I'm saving it for that. So clearly.
Yeah, we're really questioning that number 10 slot in Best Picture. It's gonna be Waltzing with Brando for sure.
Yeah.
At this point, they need to send us shirts or tote bags or something. We have given this movie more press than they have given themselves. We have done more for Waltzing with Brando.
To take this in a different direction, how many Sebastian Stan films do you have predicted in this category?
So, okay, I know it runs into like the whole political thing of it all, but The Apprentice, I don't know what to do with that movie. Part of me is like, absolutely not. But then I also know that it's not like glorifying, it's more just kind of saying like what happened during this time. So it's like, well, okay, maybe it's something that someone should see. But then the other part of me is like, absolutely not. So I don't quite know what to do with it, especially because Jeremy Strong, he does such a fantastic Roy Cohn. It is, but it's also terrifying because my God, like what are we gonna do? I do love that Sebastian Stan is getting love for a different man, and I think that if we had to choose for this category, I think that A Different Man is actually going to do a little bit more, especially speaking about Oscars and the Academy. I don't know, do they have a history of doing biopics or things that are based on like true people?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. It really depends. We have some, like nominees like Judy and Mary Queen of Scots and like certain things, but otherwise you have a lot of like sci-fi and that kind of stuff, fantasy in this. This is the Frida Time Machine category that I mentioned earlier.
That's what I was gonna say, yeah. And so it's gonna be go ahead, Shadan.
No, I was just gonna say, Stacey, I mentioned sort of question marks. Perhaps the biggest question mark is The Apprentice. I truly have no idea, especially because given, as I mentioned, voting started today. Voting is only 4 days, by the way, so it ends on the 12th. But I just wonder, like, are people gonna want to vote for The Apprentice? I don't know. Like, and again, I keep bringing up the BAFTA long list, but like that movie did so well with BAFTA, so I'm and okay, can I have some space to talk about The Apprentice for a second? I think
Yes.
what's going on with The Apprentice is that international voting bodies are more favorable to that film than American voting bodies are. So I think that's going to present an issue with that film, and we can get into it more with Best Actor, but I think Sebastian Stan is going to end up splitting his own vote there.
Mhm.
Yep.
But to bring up Jeremy Strong, who did get a SAG nomination today, so like, is that just love for Jeremy Strong because I mean people love
No.
him, or people no,
Do
I mean
they?
people. Well, okay, but
No,
that
I
could
know
they do
what you
also
not.
be. But that could also be like an internet versus, because he's worked with a lot of people. I mean, he got a Tony nomination. Like, this
Mhm.
man picks up nominations. And I feel like ever since The Apprentice came out, I mean, not The Apprentice, oh my God. Ever since Succession came out, it's kind of been one of those things where Jeremy Strong is getting an Oscar nomination eventually. What is that movie going to be?
Mhm.
So is that movie going to be The Apprentice? And I should say, like, I think the Academy has a history, like, they like their villains, like the winking devil Javier Bardem type of a supporting role. Um, so I did not have, to go back to hair and makeup, our current category. I'm sorry, Abe, I did not mean to. I just feel very passionately about The Apprentice, but I did not have it getting in. I do want to predict it. The problem is I feel so strongly about the other options. So I think The Substance is a very safe bet. I think Nosferatu, like, if you watch that film, the design of Nosferatu is incredible. I don't see how you don't nominate it. I do think A Different Man is going to get in. I think the hair and makeup people love sort of the prosthetics, and I think it presents everything that they typically vote for. So I do have A Better Man getting in. I mean, Dune Part 2, but I could see that being snubbed because, as we mentioned, the film is a bit weaker. So, like, do we go with Wicked? And then, you have, like, Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice, the first one, won this category. Like, there's certain things that could pop up here. But I think my 5 are The Substance, Nosferatu, A Different Man, Dune Part 2, and The Apprentice.
Yeah, my 5 in this are A Different Man, Nosferatu, The Substance. I wanted so badly to put Waltzing with Brando, but I couldn't bring myself to actually do it. I did put Maria in here. However, I think that may be more towards costuming. So once we get there, that might be a better fit for Maria. We'll see. Wicked, 100%. I think with the featurettes and with all the stuff going around, specifically about Cynthia's makeup and specifically them, 20-inch bust downs, the micro braids, I think that a lot of people are talking about that, especially in hair and makeup. Beetlejuice is a good one. And I think if it's going to get it for anything, it would be this category.
So do we think, like, the big blockbuster that's going to get it is going to be Wicked over Dune Part 2, probably?
Oh yeah, I don't think Dune is going to get anything in this.
Possible. I mean, I don't
I
know.
don't know.
Dune is missing way too much of stuff, and it
Yeah.
should have been more in the conversation because I always compare it in some ways to Lord of the Rings, where the Two Towers, Peter Jackson was snubbed for part two, and then part three won everything, but Denis was snubbed for part one. And so like it shouldn't be happening this way. I am firmly in I love part one, didn't love part two, so I'm okay with that. But Wicked, when I interviewed the costume designer who was like, we can just give him his award already, he was paired with the makeup and hair designer, Francis Hannon. And so the fact that they're associating those two tells you enough. I have The Substance, I have Nosferatu, I have A Different Man, I have The Apprentice, and I have Wicked. So that seems pretty cut and dry to me in a lot of ways. Beetlejuice, I guess could be in there, but like this category is, Beetlejuice, the first one, you mentioned one, Men in Black one, The Nutty Professor. Like, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about these kinds of things? And like The Apprentice, is that really more work or different work than Beetlejuice? Like, it's a more serious presentation, but which one is, technically more impressive? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I still have Dune Part 2 in this category just because of the prosthetic element of it.
I was like, was Austin Butler?
Yeah, like no, I mean I think they really like that, and I think that's something that Donald Mowat and a lot of the people like the attention to detail on that is pretty exquisite. Sorry. But I mean, I think we're all kind of in agreement, right? Like it's like the substance is like kind of like the shoe in, like that's the one where like we all feel very, very strongly about. It's so hard anymore to decide whether the internet backlash towards something will ultimately impact something, because we were talking about how the backlash for Amelia Perez didn't really hurt the movie over the last couple of weeks. But in the same regard, I feel like the backlash towards Honora has hurt the movie more.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about the whole Nosferatu mustache gate. That reminds me of kind of like the whole Batman v Superman thing with Henry Cavill, or Justice League thing with Henry Cavill. I'm getting that vibe where like I'm not sure with it, but I don't know. And Beetlejuice. Listen, I know what everyone's saying about it, but like, if you get like the crafts on a Tim Burton movie, whether you love him or hate him, it's just he's like such a visual director and all that stuff, and all those people. It's like people he worked with time and time again. It's hard to discredit like the hair and makeup that they've done, not on just Beetlejuice itself, but like all the side characters, like William Dafoe, that whole piece on the side of his face. Like, there's a lot of work that went into that. So I don't know. So if I had to pick, I'm gonna be the weird one, and I'm gonna say Waltzing with Brando. I'm really gonna add it. I'm gonna add it in here. I'm gonna say Wicked, Waltzing with Brando, The Substance, Nosferatu, and I'm gonna put Dune Part Two.
Yeah. I do think, I mean, you have to assume that those who are voting in this category have actually seen Waltzing with Brando. And while it seems strange not to seek it out and try to get a campaign out there for press, maybe it'll be released in 2027. We can all see it then. Who knows?
In the future. Now, I wish that they would have like, because I know we need to not have so many categories, but I would like a best makeup and hair, and then maybe best makeup effects, because you're talking about so many different things when you're saying best makeup versus effects. Because like Scott was talking about with the prosthetics, and that's an effect, that's something that you're adding on versus like making Angelina look glamorous, or making her try to look like Maria Callas, or I got the name wrong. Anyhow, you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, I want to move us over to a category, our first non-shortlisted technical category, which used to be a requirement to win Best Picture, but films like Coda and Birdman have defied that. That is Best Film Editing. And it's seen some very interesting snubs in recent years, and I'm just I'm really not sure what to do with it. We do have, I will mention, unlike some of the next categories, we have our American Cinema Editors nominees, the Ace Eddie nominees. They have a drama category, which gave us Conclave, Dune Part 2, and Amelia Perez, which we might expect to be legitimate contenders, and then Civil War and Furiosa, Mad Max saga. So those are some, sort of stranger nominees, even though it is true that the first Mad Max Fury Road film won this prize. For comedy, they have Honora, Challengers, Real Pain, The Substance, and Wicked. So I'm a bit befuddled here because I feel like there are a lot of options and something big is going to miss, and I'm not sure what that is.
I mean, I can't believe The Brutalist is not on this category. I mean, this is the probably the surprise for me out of the Ace Eddies, is like The Brutalist not being here.
Well, that's because the editing wasn't great. The movie is one thing, but the editing, I'm still mad about that epilogue.
Oh, whoa, we all are. I mean, there's so many choices in that movie.
Redirect
And I don't know if his
predictions, please.
speeches. I don't know if his speeches helped him or not. Anyway, Jesus. I mean, I'm gonna go with Challengers, Honora, Wicked, Civil War, and Conclave.
I'm 1 for 5 with you, Scott. I'm excited. This is interesting. I have Dune Part 2, even though I am not sure how that film will do. I feel like here that's something they would probably like. I do have The Brutalist. I do have Conclave. I have September 5, which I think will not show up anywhere else but here. And I
Mm.
have The Substance. But that makes me nervous about leaving out Honora and leaving out Amelia Perez. Shadan, what do you think?
I am very confused about Dune Part 2 now because after talking to you guys, I feel like I'm overestimating it everywhere because I do have Dune Part 2. I have Dune Part 2. Let me make sure I'm looking at the right thing. Yeah, okay. So I have Dune Part 2, Conclave, Honora, Wicked, and Amelia Perez. And I have the Substance as an alternate. But I'm really tempted to take something out and put the Substance in. And I do agree with you, Abe. I think editing is the strongest category for September 5, and it would not shock me if we saw a surprise there at all.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't put it on my list, but you saying it was like, oh yeah, of course. I have Conclave, I have Challengers. I did put a Nora, even though I think Sean Baker is also the editor on that film, and yeah. And then I put A Real Pain and then Substance.
This is really just a strange category in some ways. I mean, I think if I remember correctly, I think it was 2005 that first got. That's when Brokeback Mountain wasn't nominated, and that was like
Mm.
it was sort of an assumed thing at that point that the Best Picture frontrunner, which I know Brokeback didn't win Best Picture, and that's a longer conversation, but the presumed frontrunner was always going to be nominated. And they said they had Cinderella Man, The Constant Gardener, Walk the Line. Like, so I do think it's possible that they look at different things. The Bourne Ultimatum won this category. Like, I just don't know exactly what to do with it. And I feel
Well,
like Dune Part. Yeah, go ahead, TV.
oh no, I was going to say that's why films like Mad Max Saga and Civil War and Fury and Dune Part 2 are on this because when we talk about editing, I think that's another one that people kind of get confused with. They just think, oh, I'm looking at the film, did I like it? Versus am I looking at the cuts? Am I looking at the transitions? Am I looking at the way that, all this footage was kind of pieced and sewn together? And when you're talking about films like that, they rely on so many cuts and so many transitions where it has to be a feat to get it done and get it done in like a way that's going to be palatable. So I think that they like those big kind of feature action films. Like I almost wouldn't be surprised to see Gladiator 2 on here, but that would be on the idea that it's Gladiator 2 versus it's actually well edited because it had some, editing issues kind of going through it. So,
And to that point, we've had Baby Driver nominated here. Ford
mhm.
versus Ferrari, won. I also have an outlandish prediction that will not happen, but I feel like I want to say it anyway, which is The Seat of the Sacred Fig, a film that is,
Mm.
almost 3 hours. That is, having spoken to the editor, the idea that he got all this footage that was just whatever they could do, like without getting caught. He doesn't speak Farsi, he didn't know what he was working with exactly. And so I think this ship has sailed on that film, but earlier in the season, I might have said The Seat of the Sacred Fig could show up here, and I would be very surprised if it happened. But I've said it, so maybe who knows? Do you
It
have more thoughts on that,
deserves to
Scott?
be here, that's for sure. I was just gonna
Mm.
say real quick to Stacy's point. I think one thing we have to remember is that in a lot of these craft categories, like more is more. Like they like more makeup. That's why I was so big on Dune Part 2 because even if you look at a movie like Nosferatu, really the only place like is the character of Nosferatu and maybe a few others where like Lily Rose Depp there's not a lot going on there, whereas like Dune Part 2 there's so many characters that look completely different. And so I think even with sound like more is more, and again with editing they seem to prefer films that where there's a lot of editing taking place, which is why maybe something like The Brutalist does not perform well here. So does that help me in my predictions? No, but that's always something that I think about, and why like you guys mentioning challengers, now I'm like, oh, I hadn't considered that at all, but now I have to kind of think.
Yeah.
Well, our next
Well,
category
oh,
gives us. Yeah, please,
I'm
Stacey.
sorry, real quick.
No,
Especially
take your time.
especially with challengers because they have the tennis ball cam, and I think that that's going to be a big factor with getting into those
Yes.
nominations.
Yes.
For best costume design, we have 3 different sets of nominees from the Costume Designers Guild. For contemporary, we have Challengers, Conclave, Amelia Perez, The Fall Guy, and The Substance. The Fall Guy, No Shot in Hell. For period, we have The Book of Clarence, also not going to be Oscar nominated. Gladiator 2, Maria, Nosferatu, and one-time Oscar contender, Saturday Night. For
God
sci-fi
bless.
fantasy, we have Beetlejuice, future Oscar nominee Borderlands, Dune Part 2, Furiosa, and Wicked. So that is a lot, and that also doesn't include two films that aren't on the list. One again is The Brutalist, which has sort of been odd, especially after its SAG showing it where it's like a front runner for Best Picture and a lot of stuff, and then not somewhere else. And a film that is peaking very, very late, which is A Complete Unknown. And I know in speaking to the costume designer, she said there were so many costumes, and I feel like that's the film people are thinking about right now. Like that is the late breaking contender that everyone has seen last. And I think that could be very beneficial. And I actually just ditched Dune Part 2 for my predictions, which I feel a little bit strange about because Shadan just made the point about there's so much in there. But I have Wicked, which I think is already won this. Like we can just give it the prize. A Complete Unknown, The Brutalist, Gladiator 2, which I feel like here this is a good choice for that. And Nosferatu, which again, we're not sure how it's going to do, but I feel like this could be the place for it. Scott, what do you think?
I think Beetlejuice is getting into the costume design. And the reason why is because it's Colleen Atwood, who's been nominated and won multiple times. And this is a classic franchise. People love the character. I see that getting in. I agree with you, Abe. Like Wicked, just give it to it now. There's no point even having a debate about it. I'm keeping Dune Part 2 in here. The one that I'm actually kind of iffy on, there's two of them actually, are Gladiator 2 and Nosferatu. Because Nosferatu is very period centric pieces of like costumes, which we've seen so many times before, and they're usually like shoo-ins to get Oscar nominations. Like whenever you had like a Pride and Prejudice or a movie like that, they're always been in there. But the movie also being fresh right now kind of makes me think that maybe that will actually sneak in here, making Gladiator kind of the one that might actually fall off.
One thing that's interesting about this category is, again, it does kind of ride the line between what's most inventive versus what's kind of more impactful, especially with the scene. Because I wouldn't be surprised to see challengers get in here based solely off of the weight of I told you. That sure has caused a panic, and just tennis whites in general, and people kind of, getting into the groove of that kind of aesthetic. But then it's like, okay, well, then is that more worthy than something like Wicked? If I were to put anything here, Dune 2 would definitely go in here. I do wonder, category wise, is there going to be a Wicked fatigue? Meaning, are they going to be like, well, if it's going to win everything, do we just want to deal with it in these top categories and maybe leave the other categories to different titles, maybe titles that didn't get as much traction? I wonder if someone is going to go to costume design and say, well, Wicked, or are they going to be like, well, it's going to win everything else, so let me do something else here.
I think cinematography and editing, it's very vulnerable, but I think this in production design, even if it doesn't win, which is still unlikely, I think these are the even if it got snubbed
Production
for Best
design,
Picture
definitely.
and everything else, like costume design is the lockiest of all locks in my mind.
Agreed.
So to Scott's point, for costume design, I feel like this category repeatedly returns to their favorites. I mean, that's why you have somebody like Edith had 8 Oscars for costume design. So that's why I'm going with Wicked. I'm going with Dune Part 2 because it's Jacqueline West. Gladiator 2, Janie Yates, a huge favorite.
Huge, yeah.
Beetlejuice. Oh my gosh, Colleen Atwood, as you mentioned, and then I'm going Nosferatu. To finish out my category. The surprise here that I would like to mention that nobody else has mentioned is I think that if the substance has a really good morning, I think the costume design could do really well here, and production design, which we can talk about. But I feel like there's certain elements of the costume design that have already become iconic. Demi and her
The yellow coat,
the way that the colors are used in the costumes. Even sort of the dress that the monster sort of at the end is wearing, I think. So I think that's something to watch for. I'm not brave enough to put it in my 5, but that would not surprise me at all.
I think
Can I
being a
just can
genre
I
piece. Please, God, go ahead.
real quick? I just want to say how much that I love the fact that the substance is like this underdog little engine that could. I mean, it's being released by Mubi, which like nobody really knows what that is. Like anyone who saw it has probably saw it in a theater or at a screening somewhere. Like this stuff like warms my heart. Like when I see like a small little movie like this that continues to thrive against like things that have millions and $1 billion thrown at them, to see this happen, it makes me happy. And the fact that this is like being considered in so many categories, it shows you the strength of like independent filmmaking when it's done right.
I also think it's
And
gone from being an underdog to being it's actually been pretty consistent this whole time, which is interesting. I will say too, Shadan, I think that substance being genre actually helps it because Stacey, you mentioned before about challengers, and I think that being contemporary hurts it because historically it is not good for this category. The Devil Wears Prada, yes, that was nominated, but something like Promising Young Woman, which would have been a perfect, not like you picture all those costumes, like thinking about it, was not. And so that's why, unless challengers overperformed, I don't think it would show up there. I think it's certainly an interesting choice, but I think unfortunately, unlike the CDG that has the contemporary category, it's just not like, we all have clothes now. What is that? Is it impressive as getting a frock from the 1800s?
Well,
You know,
Netflix is also really pushing Maria for this category specifically. So
Maria, the
we'll
film
see.
that couldn't. I don't really know what
Yeah.
happened there. Like that is very strange because even Spencer was doing much, much better by this point before it just like faltered and only got one nomination. And Jackie did much better in
completely
general
fell
with the
apart.
nominations, even though I thought Natalie Portman was winning like almost up until the end when Emma Stone won. But I don't know really what happened there, especially because she's really good in the film, I believe. And it's not like she's been around a while. Like she's like Nicolas Cage, someone who like gave a great performance years ago and then hasn't done so much stuff and now is doing something really respected. And like you see what's happening with Pamela Anderson. Like you'd think that would be happening with her too, but I'm in trouble now because we're not talking about Best Actress. Shadan, you had something you were going to say about this.
No, I was just gonna say I'm really shocked by how much Maria has completely fallen apart. We can get to cinematography, but Ed Lackman was a contender, I think, for a longer, but it's just fallen completely off.
Yeah.
Well, before we get to cinematography, let's go to production design. Another one we're going in blind because the Art Directors Guild is not announcing their nominations tomorrow. That said, they also have multiple categories, so it's hard for us to know. Scott, do you want to start us off here?
Yep. I mean, I think Wicked is the front runner here. I'm going to keep Dune Part 2 in this category because of the size and scope of the film. Um, I'm not as high on Conclave as everyone else is. But I really love the fact that they rebuilt the Vatican and like the attention to detail there is great. Brutalist, again, what they were able to do with the $10 million and learning at the Globes that it took over 7 years to make that movie. That's just surreal and crazy to me. And then The Substance, our favorite underdog here, is my last pick.
I have,
Again with
yeah.
Nosferatu being a huge question mark because I do have it getting
Mm.
in here, but I could easily see The Substance taking that slot. I have Wicked, The Brutalist. I just feel like I don't have The Brutalist, for example, in costumes. Many times they're paired, but I feel like how do you have a film about an architect where the production design is such a huge part of that story? So I do think Brutalist will do well here. I have Dune Part 2, and then Gladiator 2 and Nosferatu. But I think Conclave may either take the Gladiator 2 slot or Nosferatu, or potentially you don't have Nosferatu or Gladiator 2 and you have Conclave and The Substance instead. There's a lot of oh my gosh, a lot of wiggle room in that category, even though I think Wicked is taking it, and the costume and production design Oscar should just be engraved. So
Well, it's so funny. So many of the nominations and so many of the projects are based on the behind the scenes, the kind of stories in the featurettes. And it really kind of speaks to how important having that information and how useful and impactful that is. When you learn that, John Chu planted a million pansies or poppies or whatever they were to create, the land. And then we learn about, the brutalists and how they kind of structured everything. So I think whether or not it's intentional, whether or not we're supposed to, I think so many of these nominations are going to be based on that extraneous kind of information. And my basically match Scott's at Wicked, Dune, Conclave, Brutalist, and The Substance.
I had to double check, but I was correct. Last year, these two categories, production design and costume design, matched up 5 for 5, which is rare, especially because Napoleon was in both, which was unnecessary. But I have the same first four, but instead of The Substance, I'm going with Gladiator 2, because say what you will about that film, I feel like people like Denzel, and they like the fact that that production does even if I found some of the plot unnecessary, I think the construction of what they did and what they built is actually more impressive than the first film in a lot of ways. That they actually sort of upscaled that. And I'm thinking about the water and the arena and everything. And so I feel like if you were to give one award to Gladiator 2, that would be the award I would give specifically. And so if it is one nomination only, because Denzel is a little more vulnerable than we thought, but skipping ahead, no.
Oh wait,
yeah.
one quick thing. Both in this and in costume, I really wanted to see the piano lesson. I wanted to see them do so much more, and sadly, it just did not take off the way that I hoped that it would. And even for Danielle, we'll get to that later. But these are two where, if anywhere, I would have seen them do well in those categories.
And I just want to mention for Conclave, Abe, you mentioned that at TIFF, Volker was at the premiere for Conclave. I remember, the director, Edward Berger, was talking about the production design, like, from the jump. They have done a really good job of telling you that they built, all these sets and stuff. So I think if Conclave has a really good morning, production design is going to be something that it picks up along the way.
And also the father was nominated. Like there's certain things that they appreciate that you wouldn't necessarily think of. To your point about the piano lesson, Stacey, the fact that Malcolm Washington was not nominated as a DGA first-time director is also like the second to last nail in the coffin. I think Danielle's back in the race. We'll talk about that in like 22 minutes estimating. But we'll get to that when we get to Best Supporting Actress. We have our last technical category before we get to like the big leagues. For Best Cinematography, I actually feel okay about most of these, but I feel like there's a couple that are pretty sad. I feel like The Brutalist is in no problem. I feel like Nickel Boys, even if it got one single nomination, this is the nomination. Even if you didn't like the cinematography, there are enough people that do. I'm keeping Maria in. I have Dune Part 2 because I think about like that black and white planet and everything. Like I think about that kind of thing. And I have Nosferatu because again, even if you didn't love the film, the way that it's shot, that said, I've left off Conclave, Emilia Perez, and Wicked, even though I know people have problems with cinematography. They're like, it's a little crowded. What other?
I love cinematography. I'm super excited about this category, and I do not feel confident at all. I have The Brutalist. I have Nosferatu. I have Nickel Boys. I agree with you, Abe. I think even if it's not strong, it's gonna get in there. I have, well, okay. So here's where things get tricky because for a long time I had The Girl with the Needle, because the cinematography branch loves black and white. And I can see it getting in, but the problem is if I'm not predicting it to get into international feature, I think a lone cinematography nomination would be really tricky. So I think I'm gonna replace it with Dune Part 2. And then I think I'm gonna round out that category with Conclave. And did I say Nosferatu? So I say The Brutalist, Conclave, Nosferatu, and Nickel Boys, and Dune Part 2. But I would look out for The Girl with the Needle here. There's something about that movie that I just think it could show up and surprise people.
I think I actually agree with your estimation of that. My only kind of drawback with that is how many people saw it. And that's just kind of the unfortunate nature of a lot of, especially like the international features, unfortunately.
Real quick, not to interrupt, but since I know we're not doing this show where it's going to come out today, it's important to note that because of the LA fires, Oscar nominations were now pushed to January 19th, and voting is now extended by 2 days due to the fires.
Oh wow.
So it's now January 14th. The announcement is now the 19th instead of the 17th.
Interesting. All right.
But they did start voting today. They just get 2 extra days.
Correct.
You have to
Gotcha.
go get your sticker, you know.
I voted. Te vote.
Sorry, I know I was like, kind of kept trying to say that, but I saw that and I was like, oh, we need to talk about this right this second.
Turn your alerts off, Scott. Pay attention. Best cinematography only. Eyes on the screen. What do you have,
Well, we
Scott?
just talked about the dates. That's why, because Shadan brought it up just like one category ago. She's like, it only has 4 days to vote. So I was like, oh, wait a second, is that correct? So
Never mind. Well, it was when we started recording this, but
It
we've been here
was.
for so long that things have shifted. What are we gonna
Day is
do?
What day is it? Is it night?
Yeah.
Right. For
Oh.
my pick for cinematography, I have Wicked and Nickel Boys, which is, I love that movie. I wanted to do so much more. If it gets anything, I think that it could be a good pick for that. Like you saying, even though it is a bit divisive, like people either love it or they hate it, but I think with it being so original and then so done in such a palatable way that people would vote for it even if it wasn't their cup of tea. I can see that happening. And Jomo is a fantastic cinematographer, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Brutalist, Substance. I threw in Conclave, but as my maybe, I threw in Saturday Night. That if it's gonna get anything, I think cinematography editing would also be a good one to kind of throw that into. Again, it is the little movie that almost could, but you know, and so it's such a good movie and it's really well done, but it just came at the wrong time.
Yeah. My picks on here are very like standard. I mean, I am also going to jump on the Nickel Boys train in the cinematography.
Mhm.
I don't see this movie getting a whole lot of love, but I can see it getting cinematography because it is such a beautifully shot and such an interestingly shot film. Wicked. I know everyone's like always been kept going like, oh my God, why is Wicked being nominated for cinematography? But it's literally shown up so many damn times. And then Nosferatu, Doom Part 2, and The Brutalist.
I would remind everyone that Bohemian Rhapsody won for best editing, despite most people thinking the editing was absolutely terrible in that film. And so I think that, you know, Scott's point about Wicked cinematography, I think cinematography is great.
Me
But
too.
I think that that is a valid point. I would also note that in defense of, you know, Ed Lachman and the idea of Maria being nominated, El Conde was nominated last year. He was up for that. And that is a foreign language film about a vampire. And so I feel like that is, you know, as close to waltzing with Brando as you can get in a lot of ways. But the fact that it got in is a very strong sign of him, almost the Diane Warren type effect, and also bodes well for Nosferatu because it's a lot more conventional, I think, than El Conde, which I did see it was very intriguing, but a sort of strange film to be sure. Shadan, you have thoughts on that?
I was just gonna say I have removed Ed Lachman from my predictions, but I would not be surprised if you know, like it replaces Wicked or something else. Keep an eye out on Ed Lachman always, but this year in particular, I think.
You were going to say that, but before my big speech, are you now compelled to put him back in?
No, I'm unfortunately, like we said, I think Maria just does not have the juice.
Well, I want to move us quickly through best adapted screenplay and best original screenplay because we only have 7 or 8 hours left, and I know that we have some really big categories that we want to talk about. The important thing I'll note about the screenplays is that the Writers Guild of America Awards nominations are announced tomorrow, but I believe there are more ineligible titles than ever before, so they would not be at all
Crazy?
informative, I think, anyway. So the important thing here is just separating them between what's an adaptation and what's not. Stacey, do you want to start us off with adapted?
Yes, best adapted screenplay. I threw in Conclave. I threw in Amelia Perez. I'm Still Here, I think, has a good chance in this category, just because it's getting so much. I threw in Nickel Boys because I'm a sadist and I like to hurt myself. And then I also threw in Sing Sing because it needs to get something somewhere, and I don't know, it's great. Are we doing both original and adapted? Do you say we're putting those together?
Let's do one at a time. Let's do adapted.
Okay.
What else? Shadan, what do you have here?
I have Conclave, Amelia Perez, Nickel Boys. I'm sticking. I think it's gonna get in, even if that film, because it's such a beloved novel, and I just think it's a strong here, even if it's not elsewhere. I have Sing Sing, and then for my fifth slot, I have Wicked, but I'm very tempted to switch that out for A Complete Unknown, given that A Complete Unknown seems to be peaking right at the a great time, and it's been overperforming. So I'm tempted to throw in. Okay, why are you shaking your head, Scott? Give it
Oh,
to me.
I can't believe I just can't believe we're talking about Complete Unknown in the script. But I
I
agree
ag-
with
I
I
agree
agree
with
with
you,
you completely though.
Yeah.
That's the weirdest thing. I agree with
Yeah.
you completely, but I'm like I cannot believe we're talking about the script of this movie.
Agree completely.
I have the same exact things as you, Shadan. I think I'm Still Here is a good argument, but I don't think it's strong enough. I do think the film is wonderful, and I think it's peaking now, especially after the Golden Globe win, but I don't know that will be enough. I do think Wicked and A Complete Unknown are sort of in the same, even though Wicked is a really big feat because they literally doubled the length of the story. Like, so there's a lot that's actually part of that screenplay. Dune Part 2 is also worth mentioning just because might still be in there, but it seems like we're pretty decided on how we feel about that right now. There are so many other interesting choices that just like haven't figured into this race, like Wild Robot, Room Next Door, Piano Lesson, like so much stuff that just, Hitman, how fun would that be? But like, no way in hell. Like, that would be so great. Like, that ship has beyond sail, which is a real shame. But yeah, I think we have much more interesting things to talk about with other categories. Not that these aren't worthwhile, just because there's bigger stuff. Um, Original screenplay seems a little bit more sort of cut and dry in some ways. I have Honora, The Brutalist, For Real Pain, The Substance. Feel very good about all those. And I have Hard Truths, which we'll talk about for Best Actress as we get to that. But Mike Lee, Another Year is a thing I think about with his nomination. That was the only nomination when Leslie Manville didn't get nominated for Best Actress. So I feel like, especially even though talking to him, like it is not a screenplay, like I don't know why it's eligible as a screenplay. Like whatever he's done to create a story is pretty incredible. What else do you guys have in here in place of some of these?
I have your 5, Abe. I just want to say real quickly that I think, especially with the GGA coming out today and Payal Kapadia showing up there, that she is a very strong possibility for that 5th slot for All We Imagine Is Light.
See?
But I have your 5.
I think so too, but I put Honora, The Brutalist, A Real Pain, which I think that people are saying that's more of a lock for, the acting categories, but I think it was a really strong script. So I don't know. I think that will be interesting. Kind of in the vein of if it's going to be nominated anywhere, September 5 is on my list, and then The Substance.
I'm adding in the only change that I have is I'm adding challengers in. So I have challengers, Brutalist, Honora, The Substance, and A Real Pain. I mean, if Honora gets left off this, I honestly, since half the
That'll
movie's
be it.
screaming, it's not happening, but that can be left off.
I love that movie.
I will once again mention The Seed of the Sacred Fig, and also a film I noticed on the eligibility list, which I was surprised to like, which is Heretic. And I would
I
be
was thinking
intrigued, but
about that,
if you're talking about, I mean, yes, Hugh Grant, I think also the two women are fantastic, but the script in that movie is excellent. Like that is a talking movie. Like they are talking the whole time, and it is fascinating. And so I do not think it's going to get nominated, but I would be pretty excited to see that, which is not something I ever would thought I would have said. So I'm excited that I've surprised myself.
I would agree with that. That Monopoly scene alone for me is like one of the
Yes.
best scenes of the year.
Yeah. And it's not going to happen, but I mean, we have to mention Jason Reitman just as a outside possibility for Saturday night.
I know.
Okay.
Poor
Best
Saturday
Supporting
night.
Actress is the one of the top 3 acting categories that's interesting. And I think today's Screen Actors Guild nomination sort of threw everything for a loop. There's something I've been hoping for a while. There's something I've been hoping not to see for a while. There's something everybody's been hoping to see for a while. And there's a lot of people left off. So I'm not going to say what those things are because I want to keep things neutral. But Stacey, do you want to start us off here with your thoughts on what do we do? What do we do with Best Supporting
Oh
Actor?
my goodness. I was really surprised that Margaret Qualley didn't make the SAG list. that's shocking to me. Just because it did, I don't know. So I for the Academy I put Margaret Qualley, Danielle Deadwyler. I did throw in Jamie Lee Curtis from The Last Showgirl. I don't know that it will do much, but I do think that she's someone, there's enough name recognition, there's enough, if you don't know who to vote for, oh, there's JLC. So I can see some people kind of doing that. Zoe Saldana, and I still haven't seen this movie, but because of what Shadan was saying about, it coming out so late, but then also getting a lot of talk, Monica Barbara, I think that she actually has a fighting chance in that category.
Do not say
Notably,
Ariana Grande.
I was gonna say notably not Ariana Grande.
Tell us more, Stacey, please.
I think that they are going to throw everything behind Cynthia, especially after the Globes. I think that they weren't necessarily counting on the Globes for, anything, but if we would have got if they would have gotten like a win or, something more, then maybe they wouldn't mind kind of spreading it out. But I feel like that there's so many more performances that kind of outdid hers. And I feel like they don't necessarily need to have, star and co-star as nominees for that film. But I don't know. I could be wrong because we also know that Selena, yeah, isn't on here either. So
I
Uh,
very respectfully disagree with your assessment. I
mm,
believe Ariana Grande is quite locked, and I thought she could win. Now I think Zoe might win just because she has a strong enough narrative. I the SAG nominations today sort of threw me for a loop. I've been rooting for Monica since I saw that film. I think she is excellent. I think I'm going to predict her. I'm waiting till the end of this discussion to decide officially, but I always expected Margaret Qualley to get an Oscar nomination and possibly nothing before then. So her miss at SAG did not surprise or worry me. As I mentioned before, I think The Substance has grown from an underdog to like a bona fide contender. I never had much faith in Isabella Rossellini. I think that it's a small role, and that doesn't mean she
yeah,
won't be
it's a little
nominated.
too small. Yeah.
But I'm not sure. And again, Conclave we mentioned has just that even keeled thing. Like it's not going crazy. It's not like we haven't seen Stanley Tucci anywhere. Like that's very worrisome to me. But Danielle Deadwyler, I was very worried. But then again, 2 years ago, she got in at the Globes for Till and not at SAG. And I feel like SAG is a lot closer to what we see at the Oscars. That said, that is also missing Felicity Jones, and The Brutalist had a very bad
mm,
day. I predicted it not getting in for ensemble just because remember we went through that whole list of so many films that have not been nominated, but it wasn't supposed to miss out on everything except for Adrian Brody. And so I just wonder again because I think SAG is so close to the to Oscars. That said, Jamie Lee Curtis, the same thing with 2 years ago, where the fact that she beat Stephanie Hsu in the same film was so disappointing to me. I feel like we're looking at a scenario where Jamie Lee Curtis gets nominated and Pamela Anderson doesn't, and that's
Mhm.
not right. And I'm really worried because it all started with SAG 2 years ago when Jamie Lee Curtis got nominated and then she won. And like, it's just, I guess I'm looking at right now Zoe, Ariana, Margaret Qualley, Danielle Deadwyler, and Monica. That said, I'm not sure I'm ready to take out Selena. And I also, Stacey, you didn't mention one of your favorites, Anjanou Ellis Taylor, who I feel like Nickel Boys.
I don't know that
I
they're
don't know.
gonna remember because she kind of has the Isabella Rossellini thing where it's just such a small role. It's extremely impactful, but it is very small. However, I Felicity Jones, again, we talked about this kind of in the last conversations we've had, but I think there are too many people that watched half of that movie, and her part to really shine was in the second half of that movie. However, this is the Academy, and if they could sit through Babylon and through Oppenheimer, and then this should be a walk in the park, and it should be a piece of cake for them. So I think more people may have made it to Felicity than maybe just SAG by itself. So I could see her actually kind of edging in there. Yeah, that's what I got.
I have a lot to say about this category, guys. Okay, so I think Zoe and Ariana, I would say are pretty locked at this point. I would say Isabella is also a lock despite her SAG miss this morning. Even though that performance, I don't get it. I have to be honest. I have some hot takes to drop here. That's one of them. But I think Conclave is going to do well. I think we have to remember that the Academy is an increasingly international voting body, and they're going to want to nominate her. I think Felicity Jones, I agree with everything you said, Stacey, but it's such a like traditionally baity, like the kind of performance that they go for, the long suffering wife. She has a bit of a transformation. So I'm gonna stick with her and keep her in my fourth slot. And then I have Margaret Qualley. I just feel like I don't see a scenario where you watch the movie for Demi and not take notice of what Margaret is doing as well. I think in terms of surprises, like I said, I don't feel confident about that 4 or 5 slot. So any combination of Selena would make sense to me. I think Monica Barbaro is literally the best part of A Complete Unknown. She's the only part that I liked. I think Jamie Lee Curtis was better in The Last Showgirl than she was in the movie that she won her Oscar for.
Listen.
However, I just don't see that translating. I think this is just a SAG thing where they were able to get their movie in front of enough eyeballs.
No, I wonder also about the Ariana of it all. I wonder how many people liked that performance and how many people think that she's a good actress. And
That's so good.
yeah, I'm wondering if that is going to have an effect because this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, and we can definitely get more into it when we get to Best Director. But it's taken the Academy a while to really take musicals seriously, and especially these kind of pop musicals seriously. And so now you have this person who's a pop idol, essentially. She's, wonderful singer and performer, but is that going to translate to her being a great actress? And we have Selena kind of in the same category, except that
Yeah.
Selena has spent the last 4 years on Only Murders. And so she's proving like, oh yeah, no, I can hold myself in front of a camera. I can do lines, I can give you emotion, etc. But does that read to the Academy? And I'm wondering
To
about that.
Abe's point earlier, I think Ariana, like, if she was gonna establish a pathway to the Oscar, she would have needed to win at the Globes. But I do think she's safe for a nomination. One thing I want to point out is there's a very strong historical correlation between musicals and supporting actors in particular picking
Mhm.
up nominations and wins. So that's why I feel like pretty strongly about Zoe and Ariana. I don't know what to do about Selena. She just feels like a Jennifer Aniston, J Lo, where they're just not ready to give her an Oscar nomination yet. And who has the body of work to get an Oscar nomination? Sort of the young ingenue, somebody like Margaret Qualley, an Emmy nominee who's shown up in 3 movies. She had an incredible 2024, has
Mhm.
worked with a lot of auteurs. So she just seems more Academy friendly, quote unquote, than somebody like Selena Gomez. Especially if, again, the substance is as big of a film as we think it is. Now, if she misses, that's gonna make me question how well the substance could do overall. Because I think if
Mhm.
Scott, what do you
So
have here?
I just want to add in a couple of things. So the wicked of it all, my take on this is number one, it's based on, a beloved movie. I mean, The Wizard of Oz is a Hollywood icon movie. And this, in no matter how many versions of this we've had of Wizard of Oz, whether it's TV movies, Return to Oz, even that terrible one that James
The
Franco was
great
in
and
a couple.
powerful
Oh
Oz.
my God. That did so well. And I think that that's one thing that's going for it. There's a really notable history with this franchise. I mean, go to Judy. I mean, listen, take Judy. That movie is terrible. I'm sorry. Like, it is terrible. Enough of time has passed that we can literally call that movie terrible. That movie is terrible. And like she still got it, and she right. So the other flip side of this is Wicked is now celebrating what, 20 years, 22 years, something very, very, very iconic. To me, what I loved about Ariana Grande's performance in this was that she was very much mimicking Kristen Chenoweth in that. And I think because it's so iconic, Tony Award winning and whatnot, Cynthia did her own thing, which is why I think the performance is much. If you're really going to ask me to between the two, Cynthia's performance is better because she has more to work with, and she didn't just kind of like mirror someone. But at the same time, I think seeing how closely Ariana mimicked Kristen Chenoweth and how she got the mannerisms down and like the little boops and the boops and the boops, like it just, there's something special about that. And I think that's why people are resonating with this movie so much. So those are my reasons why I think like her thing's not over. I am slowly now getting back in the Zoe Saldana of it all, that she's going to win this category, but I still think a lot can happen in the next month and a half where they can really push her out more and get her out there, and it could turn.
Who else do you have, Scott, as nominees?
I do have Zoe Saldana, Ariana. This category is like a mess for me. I don't actually think Danielle Day-Lewis. I loved her performance in that movie. I mean, she is that like that actress that every movie she's in, she elevates the movie to like the 10th degree. And she's so damn good in the movie. I just don't see it happening. Um, I don't see Jamie Lee Curtis happening either. I think they got enough eyeballs on this movie at the right time. They clearly, the folks who are handling this really dropped the ball with Critics' Choice and Astras with like putting this movie out very early on. It didn't get enough love where it should have, but like they've really kind of ramped up the campaigning for it, and I think they're going to get some love. And I can see Pamela Anderson now getting, which I'll talk to about in a second, but I don't see Monica. I think the timeliness of everything what we've talked about. I mean, this movie is just sort of getting like the buzz. It's starting to do it. Again, we talked about this in the previous things. Performances, yes. The other things, no. But I can see her getting in. And then Selena has had a wild ride with this, which is why I understand why she's kind of been stopped because, Darbez came out a couple of weeks ago, and I know he got slaughtered when he said like she's terrible in the movie, and then he walked backwards. Remember that? But I have talked to a lot of people who actually have said like she's miscast in the movie, she doesn't fit the role of the movie. So like I think there's a really kind of like love-hate relationship. And I mean, I think a lot of people universally love Selena Gomez, but I do think when you look at Only Murders, where she's the oddball, but she like perfectly fits into that material. Like we're here, it's like some scenes she's really, really strong, and other scenes like you're like, I don't know. So I don't know. It's very hard. I really only feel confident about three people right now, and I can't believe I'm saying that Monica Barbero is actually one of the three that I would do. I really don't know who the other people would be.
I
For me.
also just I want to mention a couple other people that may get votes that probably aren't so serious, but Joan Chen from Didi, Natasha Lyonne from His Three Daughters, Carol Kane Between the Temples. I wish Katie O'Brien for Love Lies Bleeding, though I know that's reaching. The other one that I would say to watch out for at Hard Truths, we don't know what's happening, but Michelle Austin won the National Society of Film Critics Best Supporting Actress Prize, and while that film has not shown enough for me to be confident in it, it strikes me as a Marina de Tavira for Roma nomination, which no one saw coming. So I do think that's possible, but I think these are just too crowded. And I do want to keep us moving because I think Best Actress and Best Director alone are going to take us so long. But Best Supporting Actor, I would have said was like 7 or 8 nominees, pretty easy. But Guy Pearce was supposed to get a Screen Actors Guild nomination, and the fact that he didn't makes me really wonder about this category, which again, we've already given the trophy to Kieran. That's done. But who are the other 4 nominees? And is Guy Pearce not one of them?
I'm not worried about Guy Pearce. I think he has a narrative. I think he's been around for a while. I think, again, even to your point, you don't make it to the second half of The Brutalist, it doesn't matter because he's great in the first half, too. I think after SAG today, Yura Borisov is very safe for Honora. Now we get to 4 and 5, which I think is tricky. I think Edward Norton for A Complete Unknown is in. He has a great history with the Oscars, all of the things we've mentioned previously about the movie peaking at the right time. Listen. So I have Clarence Macklin in my number 5 slot. I have said over and over again that Sing Sing is my favorite movie of the year. I think what Coleman and Clarence do performance-wise has been untouched this entire year. But do I go with my head and predict Jeremy Strong for all the reasons I said earlier of he is also somebody that I think the industry wants to give a nomination to, who are, again, with the Margaret quality of it all, who has more of a body of work that you could say the Academy would be favorable to? Somebody like Clarence Macklin making their acting debut, or somebody like Jeremy Strong, who is very beloved. So I think I just have to take Clarence out, as much as it literally it hurts me to my core. But I think Jeremy Strong is getting that fifth slot. I think SAG was very telling on that part this morning.
I don't know.
Was
I always
Clarence?
go back to. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Stacey.
I was just gonna ask, was Clarence nominated for the Globes? Okay.
No.
I mean, I think about someone like Barkhad Abdi who was nominated for Captain Phillips, and that gives me some hope for someone like Clarence that like it's not a name you know. I still think he can get in. I think it's probably unwise for me to bet against Edward Norton, because especially if I'm including Monica. But I think Denzel, even though Denzel not getting a SAG nomination is weird because he always has been embraced by SAG, I'm willing to just do Culkin, Pierce, Borisov, Washington, and Macklin. But it feels weird to also Jonathan Bailey. Like, what's going on there? You know?
Well, it's
And what about
this.
yeah, Stacey?
Oh, oddly enough, well, I mean, and the conversation was still definitely around Best Supporting Actress, but this is one of those categories where like it's an oh yeah category where you think you have your five and then you're like, but what about this movie? You're like, oh yeah, that one. That would have been a good one too. JB in this, I I don't know that he was in the movie long enough. I mean, he had a fantastic like dance number and everyone's talking about it. But if he gets if he gets nominated, then it's going to be kind of the Wicked of it all, just to kind of round out, Wicked kind of sweeping all these categories. But I definitely think this is a Kieran Culkin shoo-in. Edward Norton, everybody's talking about his performance. If they're not talking about Monica, they're talking about Eddie. Um, Jeremy Strong oddly is still the wild card for me. I don't know what's gonna happen with that. I don't know that he's gonna make it. I don't know. We'll see. That one, his thing is so interesting because he has such a strange reputation. And when we're talking about SAG and when we're talking about the Academy, those things do matter, like all those kind of background stories. And I think that his performance was great, but it's like how many people could play Roy Cohn, fantastic. The guy in Fellow Travelers did amazing. Roy Cohn. So I don't know. I don't know if that's going to translate. So
The fact that he got in for SAG though after being snubbed for Succession, the final season, to me is very telling of the support for him, despite, as you just heard, me not predicting him.
but then it's also, it's support for Succession. You know what I mean?
That's
It's like, oh,
I
I'd
think
love
that's a
to.
good point, Stacey. I think
Yeah.
it's like the two people going head to head. There's two Succession actors in this category.
Exactly. But of course, Guy Pearce is on my list for this one as well. I think that Guy is definitely going to go in there. I would love to see Clarence Macklin, if only to add a little bit more diversity to this category. But his performance in that, especially being like a first timer, that's amazing performance. So we'll see.
I can see Denzel still getting the nomination.
Yeah,
I
I could
think
see
he's an
that.
Academy favorite. I think he's Hollywood royalty. I think I'm very surprised that he wasn't on this list. The person who I think actually drops off this and gets replaced is the Honora guy. I don't I again, if
That's
You don't
this
even know his name, Scott. You don't even know his name. It doesn't
your
have
your Bursavoff, yeah,
Borisov.
which I butchered because that's what I am a pro at. And I definitely do not see a world where Guy Pearce doesn't get nominated either. So I mean, this is a very weird day for the SAG because it's just sort of like really what's going on here. And Jonathan Bailey is actually kind of a crapshoot. I mean, he's kind of like a roll on the dice. Like if it's like he can get in, he cannot. Because I think it's the charming personality of it's his charming personality that kind of wins people over. And he just like kind of walks into the movie, and you're kind of like, oh, who's this guy? Like everyone's swooning over him. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, Jeremy's strong. I'm gonna go with going back to with Stacey. I'm gonna agree with her. Like he's to me, like, is he gonna be the one who's gonna kind of be the one who's gonna be the last slot, or someone else is gonna take it?
Like
It's
perhaps Adam
interesting.
Pearson?
Well,
No.
yeah, no, because he did not he didn't even make the BAFTA long list. He's just has not had the support this season. But it's interesting, you mentioned like, oh, it's love for Succession, but I think that plays into it because even when you have like Matthew McConaughey the year that he won the Oscar, the big part of the narrative was True Detective. So I think having like a beloved TV, I mean Allison Janney winning the Oscar as well. So like TV work that's beloved matters here. I'm wondering because I think maybe you're underestimating Honora, but I'm wondering like if Conclave has a really good morning and if there's a lot of like weirdness about, oh, do we go with Denzel, do we go with Jeremy, do we go with Clarence, does Stanley Tucci
Eakin.
surprise? Like if Conclave is a strong contender.
It's sort of comparable to me to like J.K. Simmons for being the Ricardos, even though I think it's a much more well-regarded film. But the idea of somebody who is famous, is a past Oscar nominee, and just sort of goes along with that. That said, Jacob Simmons is a bad comparison in a lot of ways because that film got 3 acting nominations and nothing else, which is like a really weird combination. I think we have reached the. You have more? Sorry, Shadan, I don't want to cut you off.
Oh, no, just very, very small, quick. You were talking, Yura. I see that as a SAG thing. I see that as like a Globes. I don't see that for the Academy. And that's
I
just
think he's
kind
in.
of
I think he's
really,
safe.
Yeah, I don't understand
I
where
don't
this is.
know.
I think if you watch Honora, you
Oh, no, it's
cannot not.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
but I
loved
just
his
mean like
performance.
even if you're name checking Mikey, he has to go because they're so paired together. I just don't see how he misses. And I think actually if we're talking about if there's space in this category and people don't know where to go, they will go to Denzel Washington. Like if you're debating
Mm.
between Clarence Macklin and Jeremy Strong, because we've seen that before with like the J whatever that movie was,
Yeah.
Esquire,
Yes.
where they had an open
Roman J.
spot and they
Israel.
there you go, thank you. Abe is here to like be our corrections officer. But I think like when they don't know where to go, they will go back to somebody who's very familiar for them, and I think Denzel could very well play that role in this category again.
I want to move us to Best Actress. I just got an email. They've expanded this category. There'll be 9 nominees, so we don't have to choose who the 5 are going to be. That's a
What?
joke. Not true.
Oh
Not
my
true.
God. I was like, don't do
Abe,
that to me.
Abe, even if we had 9, we would still be struggling, even if we had 9.
I think 9 is okay. The problem is, I think those 9 are all like equally likely. I have my like big snub, but I'm going to let someone else go first.
I think my big snub is going to be, well, I don't even know if it's a snub. I don't think Pamela Anderson's getting in. I don't. And again, I like the thing. I don't think that the Academy takes her seriously. I don't think that one performance is going to be enough. She needs to come out with something else where she is, actually doing something. I don't see it. My list on it was Cynthia, Carla, Demi, and then I kind of I kind of stopped after that. Mikey would be interesting. Yeah, I could see it. Yeah. Honestly, if they were on the variety actors on actors, they'll probably get in here. Let's throw Zendaya in there. Why not? But I just don't see Pam. Oh, and I do think that Angelina's gonna get a nomination.
I do too.
It's great. I think she's gonna be on that list.
I think so
I
too.
have a question to kind of get us started. So I think Mikey, Demi, Cynthia, and Carla. Do we think there's a world where one of those 4 misses, or do those 4?
Yes.
Okay.
I am
I think
predicting that
Mikey.
Carla is going to miss, which
Oh.
seems
Ooh.
crazy because she literally is Amelia Perez. But if you look at other things, she didn't win the Golden Globe for her performance. She hasn't necessarily been winning awards for her performance. And I don't see a world in which Mikey misses because so much of Anora is just her, whereas Amelia Perez, there's so much more to it. And that doesn't mean she shouldn't be nominated. And it would be disappointing because it would be such a great inclusion for her to be there. That said, there have been a lot of people, some of whom are within the industry, who are very upset about the representation shown in Amelia Perez. And I don't think it's a reflection of that necessarily. I just think that I was going to take out Cynthia, and I think that's more dangerous because I think Wicked, I'm still on the Wicked could win Best Picture narrative thing, and this isn't like an Amy Adams arrival situation. And so I just think there's too much in there. So of those four, I think Demi, this narrative is too strong for her to miss at this point. I think Mikey, she is the film, and even if it missed somewhere else, like director or screenplay, which it's not going to, that's where it would happen. And so I'm prepared to, as of this conversation, take Carla out of my predictions.
Abe, do you have any stats off the cuff about wins for movies that have sequels? Or is it something where they will win the first one and maybe not the second? Or do you think those votes are saved until the second one? Like, is there any kind of correlation with that?
The thing that comes to mind right away is Sigourney Weaver, who was nominated for Aliens, but not Alien. So that does not help at all with your question. But I will encourage someone else to offer their predictions while I do some quick
Well,
research.
there's also
and then I'll give you the
Godfather and
rest of mine.
Godfather Part 2, right?
Mm.
Godfather
Yes,
and Godfather 2.
but different actors. So it's, and they not like they won, like it's,
No.
you know,
No.
it's also an incorrect comparison. But let me come back to this. When I
But
offer
the
rest of my
Wicked of it
predictions.
all, right? Here's the other problem with Wicked. And again, this is anyone who knows the play, anyone who knows it, is that the first half of the play Wicked is so much better than the second half.
Mm.
I'm just sorry. Like it just is.
You are correct, sir.
Yes.
I don't know the play, so.
And
you have my
honest,
support.
and it's just like part two of like that. I just recently watched it like a month ago. That second half is so womp womp. Like I'm sorry, like it just doesn't work as strong as the first half. That I know they're gonna put new songs and I know they're gonna try to like better it, but like I think this ends and the way the movie ends and just like the defying gravity of it all, like I don't know. You just like I saw this movie and I see people talking about it and I go on emotion. Like the way that people have emotionally reacted to this movie says a lot. And I
Well,
think that's really what it is.
one of the reasons that I ask is because I was talking with someone about Dune 2. And well, he'll be back. I was talking. There he is.
I did not. Sorry.
We thought we lost you, Scott, and then we would have just made your predictions for you, and they would have been terrible.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Stacey. No, I wanted to.
So I was talking with someone about Dune 2 and why it wasn't necessarily hitting in the areas that we thought it would. And I remember while watching that movie, I got about 2 hours in and there were like 20 minutes left. And I said, there's supposed to be a war. Like, how are they going to fit this war in there? And then it was like, oh, part 3 coming soon. So I was like, ugh, so I just kind of put it on like a shelf because I was like, okay, well, then when the third part comes out, then maybe I'll kind of judge it as a whole. And I'm wondering if, because the Cynthia Revo not getting, I guess, more attention for that performance in terms of acting, she would be a lock for me. But I can also see what you're saying about maybe it being a little more shaky. And I wondered if part of that had to do with the fact that it was in 2 parts and maybe people are just kind of waiting for the next to see what happens.
I will add that our sequel thing, the only other instance I can find in recent history is Kate Blanchett, who was nominated for Elizabeth and Elizabeth the Golden Age. But I remember that entire award season, I was like, why is she getting nominated again? Why are we doing this film? So there is no historical helpful thing. If you're watching this and you have an example, please comment. We look forward to learning.
Yes.
Scott.
No, I mean, I think it's funny because I think we all even like unconsciously do this, like when we're talking about it, like you guys have both kind of like wanted like the sing of it all, like you really want certain people. And like, I don't know, like I mean, I'm always been a musical person. But like the Wicked thing, the reason like I keep making this argument for this movie is just mainly because like I'm very passionate about this movie clearly, but it also just it's knowing what I just said. Like it's knowing that the first like if it's not winning right now, if it's not going to get stuff that there's no freaking way in hell it's getting it for part two. Like unless like they rewrite the whole damn thing and it's like they end with a Defying Gravity part two on the end of part two. Like it's
Again,
just not
Defying
happening.
Gravity.
Like
Still.
no, it's just not.
But
It doesn't.
Scott, hasn't she announced that she has an original song coming out for part two?
Right, but I just don't feel like I
I'm
don't know.
gonna
It's just the narrative structure of the play, and it
Yeah.
like they can't go too far off. Like they added like a lot of stuff for this, but I feel like they just can't go too far off because then people are going to criticize it for going too far off.
I want us to revisit this conversation in our winner predictions.
Okay.
Scott, do you have Cynthia in your nominations predictions?
Of course I do. Yes. I mean, the only change I have, I'm with Stacey again. I mean, Stacey and I agree very often. I think Pamela Anderson is not getting in, and I think Angelina Jolie is going to be the swap. And that's what I think.
Shadan, what do you have?
All right. So my thing is, we're talking about the passion for Wicked. We're talking about the passion for Sing Sing. Where is the passion for Maria? Like, I just don't feel like even when we
Angelina.
talk about, okay, Kristen, but then she would have shown up at SAG. Then her fellow actors would have gotten behind her, and she would have won the Globe because they would have liked to see Angelina come up there and have a star moment and give a speech. So like this is very telling to me. Now, she is in my number 6 slot, let me tell you. Like, would I be surprised if she makes it in the Oscar nomination morning? No. And if we are, if we're leading up to the nominations and Maria does show up in costumes, then I'll be like, okay, I was wrong. But what is a performance? There are 2 performances that I see a lot of passion for that are on the cusp. One is Marianne Jean-Baptiste for Hard Truths, and 2 is Fernanda Torres for I'm Still Here. Now, Fernanda Torres, right on the cusp of Oscar voting, gets up there, gives a fantastic speech, honors her mother. As I mentioned before, the Academy voting body has become increasingly international. Year after year, more international people are coming in. I just feel like she's peaking at the right time. Sony Pictures Classics she's going to be on Jimmy Kimmel. Like, I feel like she's taken that 5th slot because the passion is there for that performance. If you get that movie in front of eyeballs and get people to watch it, they're gonna vote for her, and I think she's taken that 5th slot.
What was the other movie you said right before that?
Oh, Marianne
Hard Truths.
Jean-Baptiste for Hard Truths. I
Very
think
good,
Hard
yeah.
Truths is just too small, and Bleecker Street just didn't have the legs to get it in front of people. If they had, then we would be having a completely different conversation about Marianne Jean-Baptiste and Michelle Austin getting it.
And statistically, she's won the National Society of Film Critics or the LA Film Critics and New York Film Critics. Like that's a big deal. But one of the past people to not get an Oscar nomination after that is Sally Hawkins for Happy Go Lucky, directed by Mike Leigh. And so I feel like, as I said before, this is going to be another Leslie Manville situation from another year where I think she's going to come close. I would not be surprised if she was nominated. I'd be thrilled if she was nominated. But ultimately, I just don't have room because I have Mikey, I have Demi, I have Cynthia. I've had Fernanda in for a while and I've had Jolie out for a while. And I have Pamela in for the last one. So that actually is an interesting thing because we have Cynthia, who like actually is sort of the establishment choice in a sort of weird way, right? And then you have the 2 like comebacks, Demi Moore and Pamela Anderson. You have the breakout in Mikey Madison and the like international superstar in Fernando Torres. And so I am so not confident about all this because we also didn't talk about Nicole Kidman and the fact that we didn't bring her up at all as like a possibility. Like people love that movie
They
and
do,
that performance. That they're not us necessarily, but I think that that is certainly possible. And so this category gives me the most stress because I just don't think anyone knows what's happening. Like I think Mikey Madison is safe. I am pretty sure about that, but anyone else getting left off would not shock me.
You talk about a great speech at the Globes, and you take Demi Moore. I mean, the speech she gave at this thing, like, I mean, she just cemented herself for the rest of the season.
Yeah,
Like,
I would say she feels also very safe at this point.
Well, while we've joked about having hours and hours left, we don't actually have that much time. So I want to suggest that Best Actor, if anyone has a compelling reason to believe Adrian Brody, Ralph Fiennes, Timothy Chalamet, or Coleman Domingo won't be nominated, please speak now.
Do you think they're going to do Timothy?
I think he is very, very much in, and especially after the Brutalists' underperformance, he now has a chance to win. I don't know that he will, but this was a
Oh
bad day
God,
for the
I
Brutalists
don't.
SAG, whereas A Complete Unknown did not need to do as well as it did. I have Daniel Craig still in the fifth slot. This category matched up last year, SAG 5-5. I don't know. What do you think, Scott?
I don't know how he's in this conversation. It's literally this just feels like it's honestly, I'm sorry. Like that movie, I saw that at Venice and it just like it pissed me off so much. I'm like, this is literally like we're talking about this character because it's Daniel Craig doing like again, it's this weird thing of like this sexy actor doing the queer character that like if it was anyone else, we'd be like there'd be a whole bunch of controversy around this. Someone else playing this role would be like, oh my God, why is a straight actor playing this character? But like it's just because it's Daniel Craig and he's so beloved, like we're talking about this, but this movie was just not good.
Yeah,
I just was
it's
this
not.
movie. It's
You have
just
him in.
not a
You
good
have him as
movie.
a nominee or no?
I do because it's just like I again I'm it's very hard when you're doing these things because you're speaking sometimes from your own passion and your own feeling towards this and sometimes you have to put that aside.
Yeah.
Like you have to put it aside and I just he's been showing up everywhere that he needs to show up with. He's like the Hung Chow of this year from The Whale. Like she just showed up in everything
She did not show up
and
at everything. She did not show up at everything.
but she showed up in enough things, right? Like
Which
she
would
was
say
like
he's stronger than Hong Chow, which is
always
not
stronger
which is
than
the point
Hung
you're
Chow.
trying to make.
Which is a shame because Hung Chow is so much better in The Whale than he is in this movie.
What about Hong Chow and
Yeah.
downsizing? Anyway,
I agree with you, Scott. I agree with you, but I said before, I think Sebastian Stan is splitting his own vote. If he had one movie, I would 100% be like, he's number 5, he's
Yes.
making it in. But he's splitting his own vote. Adam Pearson, again, does not have that base of support. If he did, I would, feel like, but I just feel like that's split. And I just feel like, again, Daniel Craig he's like, for example, an actress, we don't have a clear alternative for our sixth slot, but I feel like in this case we do. Like Daniel Craig is just sitting there, he has the British contingent behind him, and he has a narrative of like the indie actor who did Bond and now is coming back to his indies. So maybe Sebastian Stan surprises, but at this point I don't see it. I think
I mean Hugh Grant. I mean Hugh Grant's performance in Heretic is so much better than Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
Like
and
seriously.
we also have Jesse Eisenberg, who is
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
a sleeper choice, but given that film we're expecting it to do decently well, he would be a perfectly fine choice. And it's just weird because Queer is such an otherwise unsupported film. Like Challengers isn't doing super great either, but like that's the Luca film everyone's backing, and so it's sort of
Literally,
strange. Yeah.
oh, literally at the Challenger screening, Daniel Craig came and introduced it. He walked out, and I was like, "Is that Daniel Craig?" I forgot a minute. We're like, "What are you doing? Do you like this movie? Like, what are you doing here?" And then it's like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "I'm in this other movie," and it's like, "Oh yeah, you got to tell people."
And it would be lovely if we could talk about Glenn Powell, but losing the Golden Globe, that's over, I think.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
done.
Well, I think Jesse needed the Golden Globe win to be a viable option, too.
That's true. Who do you have, Stacey, in fifth? No one. Four nominees.
Yeah, I didn't, because anyone that I was thinking of, I think Hugh has a good chance to get in there, just off of like, recognition, that kind of thing. But otherwise, I don't have a clue. That's a weird category.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll actually take a little more time with director than picture, just because picture, I feel like we all have the same first 7 or 8. But let's do director. I'm a little lost because I feel like there's been a really surprising omission every year. And I feel like that's Jacques Audiard this year for Emilia Perez, but I've also predicted it not getting nominated for Best Actress. That's like a Captain Phillips situation where Tom Hanks and Paul Greengrass don't get nominated. Like Emilia Perez is a little more popular than Captain Phillips. So I don't know. I feel weird about that, but I don't see a situation in which Brady Corbet is in. He's probably going to win, even if The Brutalist gets 0 other nominations. Obviously, that won't happen, but Sean Baker, I don't see getting snubbed. Edward Berger, I would have thought could have been, but I feel like he's in this point. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think that he's a good pick. I think that he could definitely get in there. I have a Berger. I have him. I do have Sean Baker in there, even though it's Sean Baker. I also put Ross. I put Ramel. Might be able to squeak in. and Corley Fargo, definitely. And then I put John Chu.
I had Ramel in for a while, and I'm just not sure. I mean, we've been talking about Nickel Boys today, and like, does that feel like a film that's strong enough passion-wise to get in for Best Director?
It's getting more recognition than I thought it would have. And it's even getting some wins that I thought it would not have. And so I think it's very much seen as almost an art house film. And so I think it kind of carries a certain cachet with it, especially being independent and, on a budget, etc. So I think that it is definitely at least a part of that conversation for nomination.
I think a SAG nomination for ensemble would have really helped today, and the fact
Yeah.
that it didn't get that makes me doubt it. I have Cora Lee, but I think I have John Chu in for the other slot. I don't know. I feel like our narrative that Wick is going to win Best Picture, which it might not.
So
I don't know. What do you think,
correct
Shadan?
me if I'm wrong, Abe. Usually DGA will go four for five at the Oscars. Like usually there's
DGA is
somebody.
almost never 5 for 5.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and there's
usually never
yeah.
5 for 5. Usually it's like 4 for 5. So I feel pretty good about this. Maybe I'm gonna end up eating dirt every time I say I feel good about something. I have Corbet, Sean Baker, Edward Berger, and Odiard, all which got in. All which got in for DGA, and then instead of Mangold at DGA, I have Coralie for The Substance. I just think if that movie is strong enough to have a Best Actress winner and all these other categories that we're talking about, you're gonna take your director along for the ride. And she's a good art house pick. Again, I've said it again and again. Academy is leaning more international, so that fits for me.
I'm
And it's weird that we're
interested.
not even talking about Denis Villeneuve. Like he should
Oh,
be. Like it's strange after last year he was like a certain thing, but I don't. There's just too many. And there's also Payal Kapadia who was nominated for a Golden Globe, like, and James Mangold. Oh, none of us are taking him seriously, but like he did get nominated for Director's Guild, and like it does feel like the last minute choice that's not going to translate. But I don't know.
So for Denny, I think last year was the year that it had the pretty sheen on it and it was all new and very expansive and you had the popcorn bucket, and so I think in that realm, this is such a transitional film. It's meant to get you from one chapter to the next. And so I don't know. I don't know that many people were as enamored by it.
And
Um,
Stacey, to your point earlier, I think knowing that there's a part three coming is hurting him, and I think it's also hurting John M. Chu, which I never really took John M. Chu seriously in director, I have to be honest, but I think also knowing that there's a part two there hurts him.
One
mhm.
reason that I do take John seriously and why I was surprised that he didn't get that Globe nomination is because he is definitely an example of the narrative having an impact on what you're voting for. The stories he tells about the decisions he made putting this film together and the extents that it went to, and like I said, planting a million flowers and making sure this specific color of green, and and directing those performances, specifically Cynthia's, which was astounding. Is it's all important to have that story when kind of discussing him as a nomination. And so I think if it doesn't, then you're going to either run into people who are like, I'm only looking at the film and nothing else, or I'm willing to kind of look at these featurettes and read these articles and learn more about the background and then vote based on that.
Scott, what do you have here?
Uh, I mean, I got Brady, I got Sean, I got Edward. And I mean, Coraline, I kind of want to put her in, and I want to put John in. But I also feel like the way that Amelia Perez has been scaling up at this point, I don't know who to pick between that fifth slot. Um, I think John has the advantage. The problem is right now is that, and it wouldn't have done any, I guess it really wouldn't have done anything if the Critics' Choice Awards was this weekend because it would have been too late. Most people would have voted and it would have closed and everything. But I think like speeches like really kind of matter. Um, And I think if you go again, I go back, like the only thing is like where we got to see these people really would give a really strong speech that was televised and worldwide was at the Globes so far.
Mhm.
And it's hard because I don't particularly think like Brady Corbett's speech was that great at that. I felt like it was very kind of like self-serving, like let the filmmaker make a 3 hour movie, like and I get it. And then, like in some cases you want that, and in other cases you're kind of like, not always. And I felt very mixed about it because I get what he's still talking about creative freedom and artistic expression. But then when I like listen to like Demi Moore, or even John M, like when he gets like riled up and like he starts talking and just like it's like you feel that burning passion in there where I just think those things go a long way, but these people haven't had enough platforms. And I don't know if you guys all feel this way, but I feel like everything's been kind of muted this year. Like I just feel like the Palm Springs stuff that usually has like a bigger kind of like reception and you hear a lot about. I didn't really hear that much coming out of it. Like I didn't like there wasn't like this big moments or these big moments of speeches or this is what happened there. Everything just kind of feels like it's like we're going along
I
this
don't
line.
I don't remember who said it before, but like, there's a lot of time. Like there was a lot of time. The SAG Awards were the end of February. Like there was a
I
lot of
know.
time for things to change. And I think about this when we talk about something like the Emmys, being delayed, and the fact that Beef ended up beating the first Monster, the Dahmer show. The fact that like I think Dahmer would have won then. I also think that Ted Lasso might have beaten The Bear then. But certain things that like with the amount of time you have, and obviously this isn't quite as long, but I do think that there's plenty of time for things to shift, which is why Wicked could still pull off this thing. I think the best picture race. Does anybody have their nominees ranked from likeliest to least likely?
Oh, wait, one
Please.
question or one comment real quick about Audiard. Him being a French director, not speaking Spanish, directing a Spanish feature, either I've heard either rubs people the right way or the wrong way. And
Mm,
that's why
I
I'm
think
kind
it.
of on the fence about him.
I think it mostly rubs people the wrong way. That said, Amelia Perez keeps getting nominated everywhere for everything. And
Well,
so I don't think
yeah.
it's the same people. And I still think that both Carla and Jacques getting snubbed is not a reflection of people not liking the movie. It's the same thing as with Captain Phillips. There's just not enough space, and people assume someone else is voting for them. And I
Mhm.
think, the same thing with the crazy 2012 year with no Ben Affleck and no Catherine Bigelow, where like people didn't not like those films. They just voted for other people because they were like someone else is voting for them. Shadan, did you have a point to add?
Well, I was just gonna say, I think if there is a shock, maybe again I have to bring up Pale Capadilla for All We Imagine Is Light, just because I feel like there's so much passion behind her in that film. And
Mhm.
to your point about John M. Chu, I mean the Oscars just have such a long history of snubbing directors for blockbusters. So like, yeah, he's done a lot of work, but does that really matter?
yeah.
I also would not, Shadan, count out Mohammad Rasoloff. I think that it is still possible. It is not likely for the Seed of Sacred Fig at all, but for a while it was, and that's not nothing. I think that as people are going back and finally voting, that film it's an ordeal like The Brutalist, and people seem to like The Brutalist a lot. And I think that a long movie isn't necessarily the curse people think it is. It can actually be a really good chance to be like, what did I just watch? Like this really, I've been in this for a while, and so I think that All We Imagine Is Light, while clearly critically beloved, is not as much that. It's shorter, it's not the same kind of like
Epic.
deafening immersion kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to suggest for our final category, Shadan, if you want to read off your predicted nominees in ranked order, and when
Yes.
someone else doesn't have one of your films, you'll stop and someone else will take over.
Okay, I have an as an argument to make just to start, which I think if we're talking about serious contenders, I think we have 11 serious contenders for 10 slots. So I have Anora, Conclave, The Brutalist, Amelia Perez, Wicked, The Substance, Dune Part 2, A Complete Unknown, Sing Sing, and Nickel Boys. I put in Nickel Boys in place of A Real Pain, but I'm going back and forth.
And I have a real pain, and otherwise I have that exact same list. What about you
I
guys?
put in A Real Pain instead of Dune 2.
Oh,
I don't know. I don't see Dune
oh,
2 making it. I know that's big. That's big talk, but I don't know about that one.
I
So
mean,
we'll see.
Avatar: The Way of Water got nominated, right, for Best Picture.
Mhm.
Oh, don't talk
That's enough
about
of
that.
assignment. Dune Part 2 can get nominated to me. That like even if people aren't as into it, I feel like the 10 Best Picture thing, there's just space. And even if that should go to something like Nickel Boys, what do you have, Scott?
I'm literally, hold on, come back to me in a second. I'm literally just writing and finishing it out right now.
I don't know. I think that it's hard to imagine because I think Complete Unknown has cemented itself as like the late breaking contender that's gonna get in at this point. And even if we don't get the director, we don't get screenplay, we don't get all this other stuff, I think a Best Picture sort of like tack on thing is something. We shouldn't discount September 5 as a possibility. That again could be a almost no other nominations kind of thing. Glider 2, Once Upon a Time, was supposed to be a nominee here, right? Um, and All We Imagine as Light seems strange to me as a likely thing because it's not the international submission. I feel like we've seen a lot of international films break through, but every year they've been the submission, and you have to go back years earlier to a film that like Talk to Her that was nominated for Best Director that in a world of 10 Best Pictures, that and City of God might have gotten nominated, sure, but I just don't think that's happening anymore. Do we think Challengers has any legs?
I don't
I
think it's
would
gonna
love
get
it too, but I don't know. I don't know how the Academy really feels about Luca. It's he's very kind of hit or miss with them, and I don't know how seriously they kind of take him as a
The fact
director. So
the fact that he wasn't nominated for Call Me by Your Name is still insane, given how much people loved that film. And you can
mhm.
say what you want about, people that have issues
Bones
with
and all.
queer or with challengers, but Call Me by Your Name, like people loved that film, and the fact that he wasn't even really in the conversation is sort of absurd.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right,
What
I
do you
got
have,
my I
Scott?
got my list. So I'm going Brutalist 1, Wicked 2, Amelia Perez 3, Anora 4, Conclave 5, Substance 6, A Complete Unknown 7, Dune Part 2 8, Sing Sing 9, and A Real Pain 10.
So it seems like this could be the less interesting of the races. Fortunately, we still have plenty of time, even but we now, as Scott pointed out, have more time before the nominations. We also have some really exciting interviews for those. If you're an Oscar voter watching this and you're like, should I prefer Jeremy Strong or Clarence Macklin? We have interviews with both. We have lots of exciting things coming up. So make sure to check out. We have over 350 video interviews you can check out. Not all of those are Oscar contenders. A good dozen or so of them surely are. But lots of great stuff here. And we will, as we said, be back as we get more information with a final prediction tally that will be a written piece that I imagine is going to be a little bit different than what we've done today. But I'm excited. I'm glad that we budgeted the right amount of time for this very lengthy conversation. If you've made it this far, tell us what you thought. Tell us what you don't agree with. We want to engage with you. We want to be able to talk to you because we really enjoy talking to each other and over each other. And so we want to be able to do more of that. Anybody else have any closing thoughts?
We just missed Siri. Poor Siri was not able to make it today. One day we're gonna have all 5 of us back.
Yeah. I was just gonna say thank you for sticking with us and stay safe, LA. It's really scary
Yes.
out there, so just thinking of everybody struggling right now.
We're so happy that you come to watch. I'm Abe Friedtanzer.
I'm Stacey Yvonne, and don't forget to vote for Waltzing with Brando.
Yes, Waltzing with Brando should be #1 on your list. Thank you very much. I'm Scott Menzel.
And sing until the end. I'm Shadan Larki.
And we'll make sure that whatever Sari wants to plug, we'll get for the written article.
Wicked.
But
She
thank
wants
you
to
so much.
plug Wicked. I already
Yeah.
know what she wants. She's Wicked.
There you go. Thank you so much for being with us, everyone. And we look forward to dissecting the nominations soon.
Bye, everyone.